All right, welcome everyone to an Apocalypsis Historia Live tonight. You got Brady here tonight. We got Chance here on the scene, literally the scenes of Act 1 through 5 for Hamlet tonight, talking about one of the most famous, most important plays of the Western canon, definitely in English, if not all of Westerndom, probably at this point. And of course, we're talking about Hamlet, and we're going to be discussing the contentious potential dating of this play. When exactly was this play put on? How and what is going on with the mystery of the so-called Ur-Hamlet that is mentioned by one Thomas Nashe? And is it at all related to the Hamlet that we so know well and love? And so we're going to be asking all those questions tonight. But of course, thank you everyone for turning in tonight for the show. Thank you to all of our usual commenters and Patreon supporters and Substack subscribers and YouTube channel members. We could not do this without you. Super appreciate all the support. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Come hit the Discord button down below. It is free now to the public, but we are still keeping the prestigious Areopagus Book Club on the Patreon, so just $9 a month, and you can join our book club reading where we are actually doing Richard III right now. So that has been really exciting, and we are meeting once a week. And so if you'd like to come support the channel in that manner, kind of hang out with us a little more, kind of help us do more of this research, that's one awesome way that you could do that. I'm also hosting classes for literature as well on my website, kleosclassics.com. So if you want to pitch that to anybody, or if you'd like to come support me, that'd be a big help. But I think without further ado, to get this ghost a haunting here, to keep on theme tonight, we are going to be discussing, as I mentioned, the dating of Hamlet and the bizarre circumstances that surround this play. And it's important to ask these questions too, because since there is something, it's got its own Wikipedia page here, and I think I can flash it up here on the screen for y'all real quick. Yeah, chance you won't be able to see it, but because I'm not sharing the screen, I'm just kind of showing on my end. But they've got this thing called the Ur-Hamlet here, right? And by a quote by a unknown author, perhaps thought to be Thomas Kidd, or maybe it is Shakespeare. Well, before he's has been printing anything, and it's like one of our big videos that we talk about is obviously the Henslow Diary, and then we find all these other plays with the same exact pretty much the exact same William Shakespeare title. And we'd be like, oh, wow, like, can we compare this play with the same William Shakespeare title with this other one? And they're kind of like, nope, we lost it. Too bad. And, but kind of important. Like, well, what if some of those juicy, famous lines are in those earlier ones, right? That'd be kind of interesting to kind of find out. What if this, like, to be or not to be is in one of these earlier ones? That's kind of important if to be or not to be is in this potential Thomas Kidd version, right? That would kind of rewrite everything we know about Shakespeare. Maybe there's some changes in the rest of that soliloquy, but certain lines or even certain beats in there would be it would kind of change our whole literary history. So maybe before we get into the nitty gritty here, Chance, do you have any thoughts maybe in this vein before we kind of go into talking about the implications maybe of this question?
Okay. I got so much to say, and I want to be super, super careful when I say it. Oh, I got dog hair trickling off me. Okay. So you're bringing up a good thing here by bringing up Henslow, because there is something special about this Hamlet. Nobody says the earlier, even though there's an earlier or a different version of King Lear that is not supposed to be by Shakespeare. We have the early quartos of the Henry VI plays, which may or may not be by Shakespeare. That's still hotly debated. We have stuff like 1560 Romeus and Juliet. I mean, we have source plays like that. That's not up for debate, but none of them get this specialized Ur title. And it's because all of them have sort of been known. It's always been known. Okay, yeah, there's two Lears, there's two this. It's because people realized when reading through this preface to Menaphon. Menaphon is a pamphlet by Robert Greene, but the preface is by Thomas Nashe. And in that preface, he makes some references to what seems to be a Hamlet play, and that back in 1589. And sure enough, there's some other references to Hamlet plays before we're supposed to have been dating Hamlet. So we've had to go back and suggest a reconstruction of a play, the same way that, linguists do with like Proto-Indo-European, where we don't actually have that language. They have to go back and reconstruct it in a hypothetical sense based on what we know about the other languages that would lead back to it. And so it's kind of the same thing here. And so that's why it gets this specific title, but that specific title sort of overblows the whole thing, I think, a little bit. Because it's still the same question as, how do the two Lear plays relate? How does Thomas Decker's Troilus and Cressida relate to Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida? Which, yeah, that one's lost, but so is this kid Hamlet, or this Ur-Hamlet. I'm already showing my cards here. Um, and so it's like, why does this one get special treatment? Well, I think most simply because it's Hamlet. This is just the most important play. This is the most important play in Western and Anglo-centric worlds. It has been for 400 years. It's kind of not up for debate. Like, you can name another play, like Oedipus, maybe. Like, I think Oedipus is the strong number two candidate, and then after that, it's probably other Shakespeare plays. You gotta go down the list of ways before you get to like Voltaire or Chekhov or Ibsen. Like, yeah, they'll be on the list somewhere, but like, no, fucking Hamlet's number one. Like, I don't really think any modern dramatist would have any issue with that statement. And so because of that, we have to kind of treat everything with kid gloves or just be incredibly careful because everything is overblown on every side when we're talking about this Hamlet play. People want to overclaim when they're making these claims, and so we're going to go through a bunch of claims today. Just maybe some of them are overclaims just because of how much we want to really get to the bottom of Hamlet. And to be fair, just like taking away all the historical documentation stuff, just as a reader of this play, you really do want to get to the bottom of it. And it's a hard play to get to the bottom of. I think, yeah, that's part of the reason why it's been so popular for 400 years. And so maybe one way to do that is to understand where it comes from. And that leads us down this road of trying to figure out, yeah, where did this play come from? Does it pop into existence fully formed in 1603? Or is it out already by 1600 or 1601? Or could it be out earlier by 94? Or is it related to a play? Or is it the same play from 1589? And, theoretically, there's other people that might take it further, but this is as far as Orthodox studies want to go, and that's what we're going to focus on today. I think that probably is a good intro for now until we want to get into some nitty-gritty stuff, unless you got some questions or some things that you think I need to lead people down. What do you think?
No, I think that's good. Apollo Cobain had some funny ones where he's like, one can assume it was written by the Shakespeare, and I said, yeah, Shakespeare, Shakespeare.
Oh, I like that.
And he also mentioned, yeah, there you go. And he says Pericles, and he mentions Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Ogburn saying, we've got, I think he's quoting Ogburn here, we've got 1577 as a traditional version, and then we've got a 1607 difference. So it's like 30 years difference between two variations of one play, right? Kimberlin,
yep.
Ogburn, 1577 and 1607, another 30 years. Floating Homes says 1589. So no,
shut up, Mark.
Yep.
We got the whole crew here. Okay. This is good. I'm heads up, guys. If I'm a little rusty, I have not done one of these nitty gritty academic podcast streams in a little bit. We've been coming on and firing from the hip and just taking really fun pot shots at Christopher Nolan for like 3 weeks straight. And so I'm going to try and be as on the ball here as absolutely possible. But I don't know. Let's just go ahead and get into Menaphon, I guess.
All right, let's do it. So I have it pulled up here, the introduction for an archive.org thing here. And let me pull it up so that way you can also see it as well. Doodly doot. Here we go. And let me make sure I blow up the right camera. All right. And let me know how I can zoom in a lot closer, of course. So I think it starts, right here, right?
Yes.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, it just says entered for his copy, Menaphon, Camillus, blah 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 blah. This is just the Seisher's register note, but I think the Nashe. So yeah, we're talking about the. Do you want to give a background what Menaphon's about first, or do you want to just dive right into the Nashe bit?
We can dive right into it because it's honestly what we're talking about isn't really relevant to Menaphon itself. What we're talking about is what Nashe is going to go into. And hey, let me see. I have a different text pulled up. Just want to double check this. Go to the next page.
Yeah, it's gonna be the actual Hamlet line on the next page.
Okay, yeah.
Right here. Yeah, so it just says, it is common practice now a days amongst the sort of shifting companions that run through every art and thrive by none to leave the trade of Neurant whereto they were born and busy themselves with the endeavors of art that could scarcely Latinize their neck verse if they should have need. Yet English Seneca read by candlelight yields many good sentences, as blood is a beggar, and so forth. And if you entreat him fair in a frosty morning, you will afford whole Hamlets, I should say handfuls, of tragical speeches.
And yeah, keep going.
And they just got a bunch of notes here, kind of going on about it. And then here it is, I think is the next part. He inherited more virtues than vices. Is that right? A jolly long red peak beard, like the spire of a steeple, he cherished continually without cutting, whereat a man might hang a jewel, it was so sharp and pendant. Why should art answer for the infirmities of manners? He had his faults, and thou, Gabriel Harvey, thy follies, debt, and deadly sin, who was not subject to? With any notorious crime I never knew him tainted. A good fellow he was, and a night and a day he should have yarked up a pamphlet, as well as in a 7 year, or 7 year, and glad was that
the user visa.
yeah, and glad was that printer that might be so blessed to pay him dear for the very dregs of his wit. He had made no account.
Okay, you can pause here because this is actually from a different pamphlet that's making note on Robert Greene.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, this is all just editorial stuff from the modern printing. But yeah, the section in question, they put the most important parts there. I want to say that there's a longer extended part to that, though. I should have hold up. Let's see. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, let me double check it. Okay. Yep. Oh man, I'm sorry, dude. I'm trying to find this.
You have like another version of it with a little more bits on it or something? Because I can probably just find it real quick on here too.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the University of Michigan version. Okay, sorry. There's just like 5 prefaces to Menaphon. Let me make sure I'm on the right page. Yeah, because Nashe's is pretty long, and this version does not have the whole thing, but that's okay. I'm gonna link it to you right now. We're doing it live.
Oh,
There you go.
Didn't go far enough.
And yeah, it might actually be
here.
in
It
here.
is. Yeah, I just didn't go very far enough.
Okay.
My bad.
Okay, it's all good.
Yeah, because I didn't see
Okay.
that was the Night Crow part.
Because yeah, that one section cut out the whole kids and Aesop section. Okay, so yeah. If you want to.
So the tragical speeches. But oh grief, tempos edax rerum. What's that will last always? The sea exhaled by drops one continuous be dry. And Seneca, let blood line by line and page by page, at length must needs die to our stage. which makes his famished followers to imitate the kid and Aesop, who, enamored with the fox's newfangles, forsook all hopes of life to leap into a new occupation. These men renouncing all possibilities of credit or estimation to intermeddle with Italian translations, wherein how poorly they have plotted, as those that are neither provincial men, nor are able to distinguish of articles. Let all different gentlemen that have travailed in that tongue discern by their 2 penny pamphlets, and no Mervale,
Marvel.
and no marvel through their home-born mediocrity be such in this matter. For what can be hoped of those that thrust Elysium into hell, and have not learned so long as they have lived in the spheres and just measure of the horizon without an hexameter? Suffice them to bodge up a blank verse with ifs and ands another while for recreation after their candle stuff, having starched their beards most curiously to make a peripatical path in the inner parts of the city, and spend 2 or 3 hours in turning over French dowdy, where they attract more infection in 1 minute than they can do eloquence all days of their life by conversing with any authors of the like argument. You want me to read the next part?
Yeah, do one more.
Okay.
And then we can, yeah.
But least in this declamatory vein, I should condemn all and commend none. I will propound to your learned imitation those men of import that have labored with credit in this laudable kind of translation, in the forefront of whom I cannot but place that aged father Erasmus, that invested most of our Greek writers in the robes of the ancient Romans, in whose traces Philip Melanchthon, Sadolet, Plantine, and many other reverent Germains insisting have ratified the ruins of our decayed libraries, and marvelously enriched the Latin tongue with the expense of their toil.
All right. And yeah, that last one probably not necessary, but it helps point, like, this to me feels like a whole precursor to, say, something like Hall's Virgidimiarum or Marston's Scourge of Villainy, where we're getting a wide range critique of English literature, English thinking, and there's definitely a sort of attack on the plays, and there's a lauding of more scholarly types, which is, to me, completely ironic coming from Nashe. And so maybe there's some tongue-in-cheek stuff happening here. I kind of have to believe that. When he's talking about people bending penny pamphlets, nobody vended more pamphlets than Thomas Nashe and Robert Greene. So, like, and so them cutting down plays, well, they're writing plays. And so one kind of has to ask, is this just Nashe and Greene attacking all other people who are trying to do the same thing as them? Or is there something a little more tongue-in-cheek happening? Or is this part of a more propagandic effort that's maybe meant to sort of be in the middle in the Marprelate conflict? Because we got Marprelate who's attacking the plays, and then we got the anti-Marprelate who is Nashe and Greene and Lily totally defending the plays, but they're doing that pseudonymously, anonymously. They're not putting their names on those pamphlets. And so this is maybe a way where they're actually putting their names on this pamphlet to sort of say, look, we like scholars too, and we're not into the plays. So to me, it seems like almost a deflection, less than them shitting on any specific playwright. But that said, like, let's look at it real quick. Blood is a beggar. That's a line from Spanish tragedy. The references to Seneca, it all seems very clear to be pointing to that Kidian tragic structure. And we have this line, the kid in Aesop. There's absolutely no way that the kid in Aesop doesn't refer to Thomas Kyd. And so there are a lot of people that are like, oh, boom, we got Thomas Kyd. He is the writer of Ur-Hamlet. They read this, kid in Aesop, blood is a beggar, whole Hamlets, boom, that must be Kyd. And then there's some people that look at it and they're like, oh, how do we know Kyd in Aesop is Kyd? But Kyd in Aesop is Kyd. It's not the question whether Kyd is being referenced or not. The question is whether Kyd is being referenced as the author of Hamlet. And I think the key word that completely obfuscates it and makes it hard to decide one way or another is imitate. So we have, which makes his famished followers to imitate the kid in Aesop. And so we got Seneca making everybody else imitate kid. And so it's not clear to me that the Seneca means kid, because we have Seneca let blood line by line will afford you whole Hamlets and stuff. That Seneca reference, I think, is actually just the influence of Seneca. It's not a direct reference to kid yet. The direct reference to kid happens with the imitate kid in the Aesop. So I think it's left open to suggest that, yeah, Hamlet is not written by kid, it's written by someone imitating kid. And that would play into a lot of people's arguments, and it would definitely play against Vickers and Freebury Jones. I myself, at this point, lean so much automatically towards collaboration that I kind of want to say it's kid and that would really allow this passage to make a lot of sense where it could be Nashe attacking Kid because Kid's the inferior playwright in what was otherwise a pretty damn decent play. And that maybe the rest of that decent play was written by Nashe and Greene themselves. I think that that's totally open and that's stuff nobody's ever thought of. And maybe tonight I can give some more reasons why that's not a crazy idea. But yeah, I think this is it. This is what made us start saying Ur-Hamlet, Ur-Hamlet, Ur-Hamlet. There's a few other references, and we're not going to pull them up themselves, but they'll get brought up in some essays that we're going to pull up. Like Thomas Lodge makes a reference to Hamlet in 1596 in his Fig for Momus satires. But like, what's also notable is the entirety of these references seem to be popping up in either directly satirical material or by writers who otherwise write other satirical material. So I'm not sure if that's relevant or not, but keep it on the Barbie, keep it on the shelf. But yeah, I think from here we can go into Dennis's essay and start to get into actual claims and nitty gritty stuff and look at some quotes and see how much there is to say that this Ur-Hamlet could just be an early Shakespeare and whatever that means, and we can get into that as well.
Alacrity says, interesting that Menaphon is Greene's version of an Arcadia type reference, or romance, sorry. Yes, very much so.
And so that does seem something that happens in Greene's career path, which I have not read near enough Greene to fully make these claims. These are somewhat secondary claims for me, but Greene does seem to have a big Sydneyan shift in the late 80s. He quits writing, I don't know, more of the ballad type things and starts and leaves the euphuist tendencies and picks up a lot of the Arcadian rhetorical tendencies, a lot of the Arcadian plot inversions, and more of that Arcadian romance style structure seems to be more and more in vogue, which that's one of the big reasons why he's credited with Musidorus, which that's not a totally consensus attribution, but Peele and Greene are the ones that are usually thrown out with Musidorus. I myself would like to maybe throw Nashe in the ring there, but that's for another video.
Floating Home says, also, renouncing all possibility of credit, a central issue for all William Shakespeare contributors.
Yeah.
Seneca doing tragedy on stage makes his followers imitate Kid. And then he also says, the mention of Aesop makes me think of Sidney's defensive posy. Like, what is Kid's Aesop?
Oh, that's a good question. I have looked up that oh man, I'm not gonna remember, but I have actually looked up the Kid fable, and I probably should have done that for tonight.
Yeah, I remember you telling me before that it was kind of a...
Yes, I totally have looked that up. Oh, it's gonna bother me. I'll remember it maybe later.
I'll put it on my notes here, and we'll circle back to it for later.
Yeah, please do. Because yeah, that's something we can wiki or AI or something to get at least a little context. Okay, so shocker, I'm reading a Dennis McCarthy essay. I want to say straight up, this is the best thing I've ever read from Dennis. I almost agree with like nothing in it, but these are good questions and these are good points he's making. I think there's things to undercut his points, and I'm going to do that. But usually, habitually, I absolutely crap on Dennis because I just don't like his internet personality. I don't like his overall narrative. I don't like his overall methodology. I don't like his overall conclusions. Um, he smells bad too. I'm kidding. I can't say that. I don't know that. I've never met the man in person. But this is actually a really cool essay, and I like that Dennis is like setting a sort of, and he's not the first to do it, but I think he's done a really good job here as far as being a SAC person, but writing an orthodox essay. So this is all fueled by SAC ideas, but he's able to put this together into a cohesive paper that does not require it all any SAC belief, and that's sort of a magic trick to me. So like, I got my hat off already, but hats off to you, Dennis. And I think shout out to Daniel, aka Lacrity's there. I think yeah, that's something that I want to see from him, and he's been talking about it, and David as well. They're both talking about putting out some papers soon about some exciting stuff, and I think that they're both very capable people, and probably more capable than Dennis McCarthy even. So let me see. Let's get into this essay. This essay is Dennis trying to show some pieces of evidence from some early 90s pamphlets, most specifically Gabriel Harvey and Thomas Nashe, and that they seem to make references to Hamlet. And he wants to say that those references they make correspond with Quarto 1 Hamlet, which isn't printed till 1603, but people have been trying to figure out what Quarto 1 Hamlet is to the good Hamlet, which, okay, this is maybe another subcontext, which maybe a lot of y'all watching already know this context, but Quarto 1 theoretically is different from the Ur-Hamlet, or maybe it's not different from the Ur-Hamlet, but we treat it as different because Quarto 1 is the first printing of Hamlet in 1603, but it's not as good as the version that we get in the folio, or not as good as the Quarto we get the next year in 1604. The Quarto in 1604 in the folio version, that's the Hamlet that you know and love when you go see it in, at the theater, or when you pop on Mel Gibson on your TV, or Kenneth Branagh, or whoever's playing Hamlet, Andrew Scott, whatever. Those are, yeah, what we think of. But Quarto 1 has a lot different language. It has some scenes mixed up. Some little plot points are subtly different. Like a big plot point difference is in the first Quarto, Gertrude's like completely innocent. She is not complicit or knowing about anything. Is just a complete victim as much or more than Hamlet is. Whereas that's totally not the case in the Hamlet we know and love. But Dennis is trying to say that, look, Quarto 1 we do give to Shakespeare. We just think it's a bootleg version of Shakespeare, or a quickly written version done by the actors, but that it essentially is Shakespeare, and that we see evidence of everything we see in that Quarto all the way back in the early 90s, and possibly suggesting that that's the very 89 Ur-Hamlet that we're talking about, that Quarto 1 is the Ur-Hamlet. And Dennis doesn't go into exactly what he thinks, how he thinks the Quarto 1 came about. We'll go into another essay by Gary Taylor where he comes up with his idea about how Quarto 1 came about. But the focus here is trying to hold back the date for Quarto 1 is as far back as possible to get it maybe as back far or farther than the Ur-Hamlet in 89. Okay. You can read the abstract, Brady, and then we'll maybe skip around to some points where he just has his points of evidence, and we'll go over it.
So he says, ever since the discovery of the first Quarto of Hamlet in 1823, it has generated fierce debate among scholars about its origin. Recently, Terry Boris has written a powerful book-length argument that Q1, Quarto 1, was indeed by Shakespeare, as its title page states, and that he wrote it by 1589. The present article bolsters Boris's conclusion with a careful look at its title page claims, as well as the literary satires of Thomas Nashe, Gabriel Harvey, and Ben Jonson. Specifically, Quarto 1's title page and apparent allusions to Hamlet in the early 1590s pamphlet war of Nashe and Harvey independently confirm an earlier chronology for the tragedy. Johnson also attributes a line exclusive to Quarter One to his caricature of Shakespeare in Every Man Out of His Humor from 1600. The evidence suggests Shakespeare had written Quarter One much earlier than conventionally assumed, and that there was no lost Hamlet.
Okay, so first of all, I will say that straight up what Dennis is doing is saying is totally eschewing any question of kid. He is not really going to answer what is being said in Menaphon. He's not really going to take a stance on it other than just, hey, it alluded to Hamlet. And so that feels a little bit like a cop out to me. Like, well, what the fuck was all that Hamlet stuff about? Or what was all that kid stuff about then? You know? So he's not going to answer that, and that is a little unsatisfactory. But I don't know that he technically needs to answer that to pull back the dating. He does need to answer that to say it is a Shakespeare play, though. He doesn't. So let's just dive in, shall we? I'll read a little bit of this intro, then we'll skip ahead because I see the name Thomas Dekker, so I'm going to read at least till that name hits. Shakespearean researchers have always faced the obstacle of concentrating on an era when biographers were few and modern-day newspapers non-existent, forcing them to piece together information about the Stratford dramatist from numerous indirect and extraneous sources, legal documents, snippets and diaries, commonplace books, Shakespeare dedications, and so on. One important source for contemporaneous commentary on the literary scene, the late Elizabethan and Jacobean satires by theatrical insiders Gabriel Harvey, Thomas Nashe, Henry Chettle, Thomas Dekker, John Marston, and Ben Jonson, has offered some important nuggets of information on Shakespeare, but these works have yet to be fully excavated. So I wanted to read that line because that's something that I've actually like yelled at Dennis, like on online yelling, but like on Substack, I've been like, dude, you're not looking at Dekker, you're not looking at Marston, you have no idea how to make heads or tails of this stuff. So it's nice that he's acknowledging that stuff here. Even if that's not happening. At least he's acting like he's doing it. Okay. Yeah, and he goes on with the Upstart Crow. He loves the Upstart Crow stuff. I think that's a pile of dog trash, and I think any informed viewer on this channel knows at this point Upstart Crow is Shakespeare's complete farce and not worth looking at. You can scroll, Brady.
Floating Holmes says Dennis's upcoming book, North Voices, claims that Greene, Kidd, Nashe, and William Shakespeare are all Thomas North.
Oh no, dude's gone full Prector. The fentanyl, it's real, dude. It's real.
Maybe we should just abandon this cause chance and just be like, oh, yeah, it's all Sydney or Dekker or whoever, like.
No, that's exactly like the more these people do that, the sharper I'm gonna be. So that's fine. I love that. That makes me so happy. Thank you for that news, Mark. He's just going full. We're not supposed to say the R word, but Tropic Thunder. He's going full.
Robert Downey, full Downey.
Yeah, he's going full Robert Downey. There you go. Okay. And so he's talking about the War of the Theater stuff, which not sure why he's talking about the War of the Theater stuff. You can keep scrolling. Yeah, he's talking about Ben Jonson spoofing Marston and Dekker, and I don't have time for Dennis acting like a buffoon around these kinds of topics. He's like a child that walks into a theater with no context. Keep going. Sorry. Go back up. Go up a little more. We need to look at. Okay. Catherine Junkin Joints points out that it is impossible not to find a Shakespeare reference. Oh wait, go up a little more. So we can get a little context. A little more. Okay. In Every Man Out of His Humor, Johnson uses the character of Sagliardo, the newly wealthy satin-clad social climbing rustic, to mock Shakespeare. In the character descriptions, Johnson writes that Sagliardo is an essential clown so enamored of the name of a gentleman that he will have it, though he buys it. Thus, in the satire, Sagliardo aggressively pursues a higher social rank and purchases his coat of arms with the crest, not without mustard. Similarly, Shakespeare's social aspirations were well known, and he recently obtained a coat of arms with the crest, not without right. H. N. Gibson, noting the similarity of the crest and the fact that Shakespeare did aspire to gentility, writes that there can be little doubt that Shakespeare was one of Jonson's victims and every man out of his humor. So I like that Dennis is quoting somebody on this, but he's quoting somebody to make it look like this is a consensus idea. This is by no means consensus in Orthodox. I've done deep digs to see where the Orthodox stands on this, and there are people on both sides of the coin. And to be fair, like I think a lot of Orthodox people don't want to think that this is Johnson attacking Shakespeare, because why the fuck would Johnson attack Shakespeare? Why would he do that? He would never do that. Shakespeare's the best. But at the same time, I'm still open to that. This is absolutely has nothing to do with Shakespeare, because at some point, the information that's required for Johnson to know this joke, it's not public information. That Shakespeare's coat of arms, granted, it's in the administrative system. Now, that said, Ben Jonson is buddies with William Camden, who happens to be one of the guys overlooking Shakespeare's coat of arms. So it is possible that Jonson's getting this knowledge through Camden, but it could just be completely a coincidence, because that's what every middle-class dude in England's trying to do at that point. Hall goes at length talking about this in Virgil Demiarm, and yeah, maybe Hall is referencing Shakespeare here and there, but in those sections, it's by no means clear that he's referencing Shakespeare. He seems to be talking about the whole country of England. And so we have this whole thing with, not without right. That's a translation of what was on Shakespeare's Herald, non sans droit. I've seen some arguments that say that's actually all bullshit, that that's not the right French translation for not without right, and that's probably a manufactured piece of evidence. I'm not going to go down that line too far. What I do want to point out, though, is that the joke is not without mustard, correct? Okay, so not without mustard sounds like not without right, and we got this coat of arms stuff. But what in the fuck does mustard have to do with Shakespeare? And then people are like, well, Shakespeare brings up mustard and as you like it, and maybe that's him responding to Ben Jonson. Okay, fine, but why did Johnson bring up mustard in the first goddamn place? Does anybody have anything for this? And so if we go and do what a lot of these attributionists do, and we go look in University of Michigan EEBO or any university's EEBO, I just use University of Michigan because it's free for us plebeians who don't have university access. But if we go and type in without mustard, you don't even have to put not, just put without mustard. What is the very first use ever in English? Who do you think writes it, Brady? You don't even have to answer. Just take off your hat. Yeah. Yes. Thomas Nashe is the first to use without mustard and not without mustard. Okay, and then after Nashe uses it, only two other people use it. Which, let me make sure I got my notes correct.
Take bets in the comments. Who do you think the other ones are? If you can beat chance to the punch.
So next used in 1594 in a printing of Thomas Lodge and Robert Greene's Looking Glass for England, and the quote is an egg without salt, without mustard. So it's just without mustard. It's not without mustard. Anthony Copley uses it in a 1595 jest pamphlet, which Anthony Copley basically was a super poor man's Nashe. And then it's next used in 1599, Lytton stuff by Nashe. And then it's in the 1600 printing of Every Man Out of His Humor. So I just want to point out, like the majority of the uses, there's only 5, and 3 of them are from Nashe. Okay, and then if we're also looking at this, which, shout out to Daniel here, the next use of the phrase not without mustard is not until 1618. Guess whose work it's in? It's in Thomas Decker's Owl's Almanac. But to be fair, that is not printed as by Thomas Decker. It's printed as by Jokindary Marybrains.
Who? Jokindary what?
Marybrains. Love that name. Jokindary Marybrains. Which Jokindary Marybrains actually breaks an argument that I see Oxfrods and Dennis both push, that There is no example of a pamphlet or a play on the title page of somebody using M for master with a pseudonym. So
Hmm.
Dennis and Oxfrods have argued that master always means that that person has a title. Um, so if they have master, then they are a gentleman. So when we see M before Shakespeare, it means he's a gentleman. He did get these coat of arms. Oh, I'm sorry. Where did Jokindary Marybrains get his goddamn coat of arms? Um, yeah. And so if I don't know if you go with my idea that Nash could possibly be printing under Decker way past 1601, we don't have to say he's still living. There's maybe ways around that. But then yeah, that's four of the six uses are Nash outside of Ben Jonson. Um, so why the fuck is he using these Nash words for Sagliardo? What's that got to do with anything? But at some point, let's just start asking that question in general. What the fuck does Nash have to do with anything? Excuse my French, but we've already had Nash with Menaphon. We now have Nash in this Ben Jonson reference. Let us continue. What else can we find?
Keep going. Just keep scrolling this essay.
Yeah, just keep scrolling on this. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Go down to the like a next paragraph or something, or do you want to read the Catherine Duncan Jones part?
Yeah, we can do that. Catherine Duncan Jones points out that it is impossible not to find a Shakespeare reference in the arms, referring to it as Johnson's mockery of Shakespeare's pursuit of gentility. Recent discoveries by Heather Wolf of documents found in archives of College Arms confirm that it was indeed Shakespeare who was pushing to acquire the coat. And yeah, not his dad. That was sort of the debate. Was it him or his dad? As Wolf observes in a New York Times article on her findings, keep scrolling. It makes it abundantly clear that while Shakespeare was obtaining the arms on behalf of his father, it was not really for his own status, she said. In substituting not without mustard for not without right, Jonson probably took his cue from the not without mustard scene in The Taming of the Shrew, in which Grumio, attempting to starve Catherine, refuses to serve her beef without mustard. Now, there's never actually a phrase that says not without mustard here, right? And so I just want to point out, like, is Dennis actually unaware of Pierce Penniless? Has Dennis never read Pierce Penniless? Because he's like, oh, it must be from Taming of the Shrew, which Taming of the Shrew is not printed till the fucking folio. He means Taming of a Shrew, but Taming of a Shrew doesn't have this scene. And so you have to get into this whole nitty gritty argument of when the actual dating of Taming of the Shrew is, and that's not abundantly clear. And so it's super not clear if this play comes out before or after Pierce Penniless. That's for damn sure. In fact, I believe it is after Pierce Penniless. So yeah, there it is. But that said, I'm of the opinion that Taming of a Shrew is a Nash Marlowe product, and that Taming of the Shrew is a reworking of that Nash Marlowe product, probably by Haywood, which we're going to get to him in a little bit.
It says Taming of a Shrew come out in quarter in 1594.
Yeah, so it's 2 years after Pierce. Yeah, so fuck off, Dennis. Sue me. Not without mustard is an effective shorthand description of the scene, and perhaps one of the few Shakespearean scenes Jonson could think of to spoof the phrase "not without right." Grumio is also in a rustic Italianate cloud, just like Sagliardo. Yeah, and just like half of the fucking drama of English literature. Like, what are you talking about? Everybody's jacking Italianate clowns and Commedia dell'arte. Like, this is all so silly. Okay, but we're going to get to the next piece of evidence, which this one's a little harder to pull apart, but not really. Perhaps the satirist's most obvious jibe at Shakespeare is Sagliardo's comment, "I'll give coats, that's my humor, but I lack a colocynth." The comment alludes to one of the jests mentioned by Hamlet in Cordo 1 when he complains about the various jokes that clowns will improvise on the stage. And my coat wants a colocynth, and your beer is sour and blabbering with lips, and thus keeps in a syncopace of jests. The early English Books Online digital database reveals no works printed at any time other than Every Man Out of His Humor in Quarter 1 that place coat near colocynth. Evidently, Jonson was again using the clown Sagliardo to spoof one of the lines that Shakespeare had associated with clowns. Okay, so one, that's just a giant interpretation of what Sagliardo is or isn't doing with that line. And so, grain of salt there. But two, the obvious question should be, wait, how do we know Hamlet didn't take the line from Ben Jonson? Or how do we know that both of them aren't taking the line from something else, right? Where they're both borrowing from a common source. Um, and so let's see what he has to say to maybe back that up. Yet significantly, this line does not appear in the authentic longer versions of the Hamlet, which is likely the reason that it has not been conventionally associated with Shakespeare, which that's true. Had the unique line appeared in the second quarto or the folio versions, no doubt many scholars today would accept this line as a jibe at Shakespeare, just like they do with the Tiger's Heart line, which is also fucking wrong, so good one, Dennis. Moreover, Hamlet's comment in Quarto 1 has chronological significance as we know the clown to whom Hamlet is referring. As Leah Marcus writes about the 1580s, Leah Marcus is a good Lily scholar, actually, about the 1580s clown Richard Tarleton. Two resembling the jests to which Hamlet refers were eventually published in Tarleton's Jests, drawn into these three parts in 1613. The quip about sour beer was probably based on a jest which Tarleton played drunkard before the Queen, and the line about the coat wanting a collison appears in a jest in the same clown played on a red-faced gentleman in an alehouse to make the company merry. Keep scrolling.
Before also it says Alacrides also says the not without mustard was a kind of punchline of a story in Pierce Penniless. A guy who promises God during a storm out at sea never to eat salted fish again. The idea was it was a kind of hidden caveat. He won't eat salted fish again without mustard.
And so that being the giant punchline of Pierce Penniless has way more weight than the Grumio Catherine scene, right? At some point, the Grumio Catherine scene is itself building on Pierce Penniless, right? Okay, to be clear, the line about a coat that wants or lacks a collison does not appear in Tarleton's jest, which, not verbatim, but when so far has verbatim been important for Dennis, right? Not without mustard's not in Taming of the Shrew, but he fucking quoted that, right? Because what we're going to see is that Tarleton absolutely makes this jest. He just doesn't say the word coat. He says the word sleeve instead, right? And so Dennis is saying that therefore Shakespeare and Jonson aren't both borrowing from Tarleton, that it must be Jonson borrowing from Shakespeare who's borrowing from Tarleton, which is stupid. Okay, with that ale joke, it seems clear that Hamlet in Q1 is spoofing Tarleton. And since Tarleton died in 1588, and as Hamlet's line appears to refer to specific moments from Tarleton's life, this would seem to point to a date of origin closer to 1588 than 1603. If a dramatist wanted to break the spell of a Hamlet and insert a topical joke the theater audience would understand, one would think he would choose allusions less than 15 years old. Well, okay, so do you see how loaded that fucking sentence is? He's like, if a dramatist wanted to break the spell of a Hamlet, well, that's what you're trying to prove, Dennis. So you can't use that as a hypothetical, right? You were trying to prove that that's exactly what Ben Jonson is doing with this reference. And so you can't be like, well, if Ben Jonson's making a reference to Hamlet, it can't be a 15-year-old reference. But you're trying to prove that it's a reference to Hamlet. So you can't circle back to that. That's so bad. But let's think about that. 15 years old. Why would they do that? Well, as we saw earlier, when was Tarleton printed?
13.
That's 25 years later. That's 10 years after Hamlet. Why the fuck are they printing Tarleton? He's so old and outdated. Who cares? Except Tarleton gets printed in 1611, 1613, 1630, 1638. He's incredibly fucking popular. He gets referenced by dozens of authors. Most references by name to Tarleton are from who, though? Take off the hat.
Again, Bullwinkle?
Yeah, if you go into UMich EEBO and type in Tarleton, there are more Thomas Nashe works referring to Tarleton than any other single author.
I'll just keep putting on more Thomas Nashe hats as as we go on.
Different Thomas Nashe, but same idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so this idea that Ben Jonson or a 1601 or 1603 Hamlet wouldn't refer to Tarleton. It just doesn't hold any water. Tarleton's incredibly popular. And in fact, most scholars think that there's a lost printing of Tarleton from the 90s as well. So he's just been continually popular. There's no reason for there not to be a Tarleton joke, honestly. Now, that said, it could still be from 1589. By no means does it disprove that, but it's just showing that absolutely nothing that Dennis is showing actually adds up to it must be from 89, at least thus far. Let's see. He has a few more points. That said, none of the Ben Jonson points are landing. Let's see. Yeah, and I'm not even going to read the rest of his Ben Jonson stuff. It's terrible. Scroll another paragraph. All right, here we go. Two other literary insiders, Nashe and Harvey, also appear to make blatant allusions to Hamlet. These references appear in their long-standing pamphlet feud, which began in 1589 with Nashe's preface to Robert Greene's Menaphon and continued into the 1590s. The Menaphon preface included the first known mention of Hamlet. Yeah, we've already read this. The allusion to Seneca, tragical speeches, and gratuitous stumble over Hamlets, which was italicized in the original, makes it clear Nashe is referring to some version of the Danish tragedy, which I'm glad that he called it the Danish tragedy. If we go into Henslow's diary in 1602, there is a play by a certain Henry Chettle called The Danish Tragedy. Maybe we'll circle back to that point because I do want to talk about 1602 in Henslow diary, but we'll see if we get there. Typically, scholars who accept the orthodox chronology assume Nashe's preference has no relevance to Shakespeare himself, and Nashe was referring to a lost Hamlet, perhaps by Thomas Kyd. This is going to be Dennis's only mention of Kyd here, with a perhaps. That's it. However, the next two allusions to him, one digression. I find Dennis's lack of Kyd very ironic because Dennis's methodology is absolutely a mirror version, except a poor man's mirror version, of Brian Vickers, who is the Kyd guy. So it's funny that the Kyd guy uses the same exact methodology, which is just plagiarism software. And they just find a bunch of parallels in plagiarism software until they can amount enough to say, Kyd wrote it, or North wrote it. It's really bad. However, the next two allusions to Hamlet in the pamphlet war, which include quotations from Hamlet, suggest that Nashe was not referring to a lost version. The context is important. After many scathing pamphlets, especially attacking Gabriel Harvey and his brothers, Nashe writes an apology in his foreword, bids 100 unfortunate farewells to such vitriol, and promises an unfeigned conversion. But Harvey, perhaps doubting his rival's sincerity, would have none of it. In his next reply, in a new letter, Harvey seems to imply that Nashe's sudden vacillation in the quarrel appears rather Hamlet-like and uses the Danish prince to mock Nashe's sudden wavering. Let's see if that claim holds up. Let's look at the quotes. Scroll down a page. Did I never tell you of a graver man that wore a privy coat of interchangeable colors? And for the art of revolting or recanting might read a lecture to any retrograde planet in heaven or earth, or of sheep, as Seneca writeth, change them from white to black and from black to white, after a stern and ruthful tragedy solemnly acted, who deeply are plunged in sober and melancholy dumps than some good fellows that from a pleasant and wanton comedy finely played return as merry as a cricket and light as a feather? What say you to a spring of rankest villainy in February and a harvest of ripest divinity in May? May they not cease to wonder, that wonder how Machiavel can teach a prince to be and not to be religious? Original emphasis. Okay. So Harvey makes a few explicit references to Nashe, who is now recanting his past invective. Having first penned hateful tracts, The Spring of Rankest Villainy in February, Nashe was now apologizing in his religiously oriented Christ Tears, a harvest of ripest divinity in May. But a number of his comments suggest that Harvey was comparing this reversal to Hamlet's notorious fluctuations. The important lines and phrases are: 1. Graver man that wore a privy coat. 2. And for the art of revolting and recanting might read a lecture to the heavens. 3. Seneca writeth ruthful tragedy, solemnly acted, melancholy dumps, tragical speeches. Machiavel can teach a prince to be and not to be religious. Okay. So before we go any farther with Dennis's commentary, I'll let you guys that are watching this sort of decide and, sound off in the comments. Like, what do you think Harvey's saying here? Is Harvey talking about Hamlet or not? I could totally see what Dennis is saying, right? Um, to be and not to be religious, a prince. We also have, Machiavel. Hamlet could be considered a Machiavellian character. We have graver man, and there's the grave speech. Tragical speeches. So this could very well point to Hamlet. But if it is pointing to Hamlet, Harvey's being sort of careful and he's not being too explicit, right? He never said Hamlet. He could have said Hamlet, never said Hamlet. And so at some point, a lot of these points fit with a lot of plays. Um, Machiavel teach a prince to be and not to be religious. Is that not Richard III instead? I don't know. Seneca writeth tragic speeches. That's any tragedy in the early 90s. Graver man that wore a privy coat. Is there any privy coat in Hamlet? I don't know. The art of revolting or recanting might read a lecture to the heavens. Um, is there any point where Hamlet reads a lecture to the heavens? Well, he's going to go into an argument here saying in quarter one, Hamlet's supposed to be reading a book when he gives to be or not to be speech. And his whole argument's going to hover around that. Um,
Nah.
So let's see. Scroll down just a little bit. And so he's arguing that there's a grave scene in Hamlet and that's what graver man means. It's an interpretation. It's possible. We do not know what. Keep going. But the next line seems to be a direct hit. And for the art of revolting or recanting might read a lecture to any retrograde planet in heaven or earth. Due to the prince's ethereal philosophizing on heaven and earth, the tragedy is the most peculiarly celestial in the canon. That's a completely subjective point. Do you think that Hamlet's speech is the most celestial in the canon? Is it any more celestial than maybe Timon or Lear, or even Bottom? I don't know. That's maybe up for debate. This is also true in the first quarter version, in which we find a juxtaposition of heaven and earth no fewer than 7 times, 4 of them in Hamlet's speeches. But the description of a graver man reading a lecture to the heavens seems to aim at the to be or not to be soliloquy in particular, which, since Dennis was so particular about specific exact quotes, Tarleton never said coat lacks a collison. Well, Hamlet never said to be and not to be. Hamlet said to be or not to be. Am I being too nitpicky there? That's up for debate. But to be or not to be is not in Harvey's section there. It says to be and not to be religious. It's not exactly clear. Like that could be argued to be an undercurrent or a subtextual theme of Hamlet for sure. But it's not abundantly clear on the surface that play is about being religious or not being religious. Like in a very literal sense, it's not like somebody's revoking their Catholicism or something in that play. Okay. In quarter one, Hamlet enters the scene poring upon a book just before he launches into its version of the speech. In their introduction to Hamlet, editors Bate and Rasmussen stress this particular staging of the famous soliloquy. His famous question to be or not to be is asked as if in response to something in the book he is reading. Okay, but that's still not actually a lecture, right? And he's definitely not reading it directly. It's a response. It's an aside. It's a soliloquy. It's how soliloquies work. By no means is it a lecture that he's giving to the heavens. If anything, it's the opposite of a lecture because he's asking questions, right? Okay. W.B. Worthen even suggests that the intent may have been for Hamlet to read from the parts of the book during its delivery. In the 1603 quarto, the king notes Hamlet poring upon a book just prior to be or not to be soliloquy, licensing the notion that Hamlet's reflections are prompted by, perhaps even read from a book, which I'm not at all against that. I just don't know that connects to Harvey's statement, right? Burbage is Hamlet reading a book on stage and then giving a speech to the sky would indeed provide a dramatic example of a graver man. Sure, but you could do this with a lot of plays, Dennis. I don't know how firm this is. The next lines only reinforce this interpretation. In them, Harvey gratuitously forces allusions to Seneca, a stern and ruthful tragedy solemnly acted, and its actor deeply plunged in sober melancholy dumps. Which it doesn't say that the actor is plunged in sober and deeper melancholy dumps. It says the people who go to watch it are, right? So Dennis is a little bit stretching the reading again. Okay. The OED defines dumps as a fit of abstract musing, so perhaps no better phrase could be used to describe Hamlet. Sure. Hamlet's best is described as beset by melancholy, including thrice in Q1. Which I just want to say, like, as long as we're talking about being religious and not religious and talking about melancholy, yeah, Merchant of Venice comes to mind, right? Opening a Merchant of Venice. Antonio, why am I so melancholy? Isn't that whole play about learning to forgive and be a good Christian? Just saying.
I feel like also
So
Faust, Dr. Faustus kind of fits a lot of this too. And he's always reading from
yeah,
books too, I feel like.
yeah, no, exactly. Um, it makes is, and I guess I don't know if Faustus is technically a prince. Um, um, but yeah, the question remains, I think. If any doubt remains, okay. Certainly Harvey removes it at the end by quoting from the opening line of the soliloquy. Well, does he quote from the opening line or does he say a different line? That's not entirely clear. Now he does put it in italics. Um, and I went ahead and looked through EEBO. There is no to be or not to be before Harvey's new letter here. And there's not even to be and not to be. But Harvey is a super classicist, so maybe perhaps Harvey's referencing a Latin line. And yeah, the Latin version of to be or not to be, essay non-essay or something like that. Yeah, that's in the EBO a bunch of times, and that goes back to the early 1500s. So I think one would have to vet all of those to make sure that none of those are being referenced either. Um, but maybe once again, maybe I'm being too nitpicky. Hamlet is a prince tussling with religious questions, blah blah blah. All right, you can skip forward to his next point. We've gone over this.
Right.
Yeah, you can skip. We don't need to read that. We know that Hamlet and Claudius function like Machiavellian roles to some extent. Naturally, Harvey's response infuriated Nat, who reprinted Christ's Tears the next year, taking out the repentant forward and replacing it with one that includes a response to Harvey's Hamlet allusion. After twice referring to Machiavel, Nash stresses Harvey's recent literary attacks on the deceased, likening him to the clownish grave digger whom Hamlet denounces for being so brutish and vile with the bones and skulls of the buried. Master Lily, poor deceased Kit Marlowe, Reverend Dr. Pern, with 100 other quiet, senseless carcasses before the conquest departed, and the same work he, Harvey, hath most notoriously and vilely dealt with, and to conclude he hath proved himself the only Gabriel gravedigger under heaven. Yeah, Hamlet does have a gravedigger, but nothing in here necessarily has to relate to Hamlet. We know what the gravedigger insult would be regardless, right? So this may have nothing to do with Hamlet. Two sentences prior, Nash even quotes the gravedigger scene, mocking Harvey's flourishing style. His vainglory, which some take to be his gentlewoman, he hath new painted over an inch thick. This repeats Hamlet's plea to York's skull. Now go to my lady's chamber and bid her paint herself an inch thick. This was not a common phrase. A search of EEBO for all works that place paint within 10 words of inch thick records Q1 is the earliest example, and the only three non-Hamlet related uses after that. Nash's altered edition with this forward is not yet searchable on EBO, or else his pamphlet would have provided their first recorded example. God damn, Dennis. Yeah, if I had a muffin, man, you give a moose a muffin. Jesus. Whew, okay, yeah. Which, okay, painted an inch thick, but Nash could have totally come up with painted an inch thick, and Shakespeare or whoever borrowed it, right? Like, at some point, what I want to kind of ask is all this Harvey Nash stuff not references to an 89 Hamlet, but fuel for the actual Hamlets that would come out after this? Um, could some of these scenes, especially if written by Nash, be created from some of these quotes, from some of these ideas? Maybe that's a crazy thing to ask, but at some point we do have to ask the direction of borrowing. And Dennis by no means is allowing Nash to be the original. And I think that's a little crazy. I've done this with, I want to throw Mariana under the bus, but Mariana, years ago was making tons of Florio first claims, and she wrote a whole Substack about the word pantaloon, and that, Florio had first used it, and no, Nash did. Nash used it first. And Nash used it more often than Florio. And so she was trying to use that for an argument for Love's Labor's Lost. And I'm gonna just tell y'all right now, don't fuck with me with Love's Labor's Lost. Like I probably just am gonna be able to unpack it better. Like, not saying don't try, but um, don't be surprised. Okay. Let's continue on further because I want to finish out with his last point and maybe solidify my point. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Yeah. Okay. Terry Boris also stresses the title page claim and its importance in dating the play. The last known performances of the Lord Chamberlain's Men in the city of London took place in the winter of 94-95, and at the special request of their patron, referring to Lord Hunson's letter to the Lord Mayor asking for permission for the London performances at Cross Keys Theatre. Boris also points out that Shakespeare's company had performed a Hamlet in early 1594 outside the city at Newington Butts, and that Thomas Lodge alluded to a performance of Hamlet at the theatre also outside the city in 1596. Boris makes the only reasonable conclusion. The obvious explanation for this anomaly would be that the Chamberlain's Men at the Cross Keys Inn in the city of London in the winter of 1594-5 performed the same Hamlet play they had performed in Newington Butts earlier in 1594, and also performed in the theater outside the city in 95-96. In other words, the Hamlet play of 1594 is the Hamlet play printed in 1603. Okay, cool. All that's great. I'm cool with all that. You notice what Boris didn't say here is that must be the 89 Ur-Hamlet, right? Did not ever say that the 94 dating has anything to do with the 89 play. It's still completely possible this 94 play is completely separate from the 89 play. Now, I personally probably doubt that, but there's no real point being made here. And the point I would like to make is what a convenient date, 1594. It's almost like that's the exact year after all this Harvey Nash pamphlet stuff. It's almost like the writer of Hamlet was able to take all those Harvey Nash pamphlets and make some scenes out of these pieces. I'm just gonna throw that out there. People can judge that for how they want. Scroll down a little bit. So he's keep scrolling. Keep scrolling. Yeah. This leaves Minzer with the last possible explanation that the Lord Chamberlain's men ignored the ban and companies continued to play in London in spite of it. Minzer accepts this as the most likely reason, even though he points out that it is at odds with the conventional view of late Elizabethan practice, especially Andrew Greer's conclusion that the winter 94-95 would have marked the last occasion that the city inns were ever used for playing. But this new case that Minzer makes to support fugitive inn playing is weak. For example, Minzer notes, my bad, keep scrolling. This is not the section I wanted. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling.
There's the Julius
Yeah, he's having a
He's having to quote freaking Germans. Jesus. Keep scrolling. Keep scrolling. Because he's going through this whole thing to argue that since it's being played at the ends, it must have come. It must be a play prior to the 1594 ban, and so it must be older than 1594. And this is all extremely tenuous. It's just him marking out all the plays that were titled as performed in the city, and he shows that they're all pretty old plays. That's fine, but we have an extremely fragmented documentary record. I don't know how much I would base off of that. Um, the thing is, Henslow himself says Hamlet's performed in 94. Yeah, so at some point, I don't know if there's any reason to go any earlier than 94. I don't think that he's shown any evidence to go earlier than 94. And I don't think he's actually shown evidence to go as early as 94. It's just possible. At some point, I'm cool with 94 is maybe what I'm saying. But yeah, none of this is conclusive. And moreover, the big question that I'm really circling around, the big question, what does Thomas Nashe have to do with Hamlet? He has quoted Thomas Nashe several times here. And when he's not quoting Nashe, he's either quoting Ben Jonson stealing a quote from Nashe, or he's quoting Harvey, who's attacking Nashe. So why is it that 100% of our Hamlet references circle around Nashe? At some point, I do kind of want to ask, why would Harvey and Nashe use Hamlet in these pamphlet wars? Just because it's sort of popular? But like, if that's an 89 play, I'm going to use his late date argument. Like, why would they be arguing about that 92, 93, 94? Like, and, you know, at some point, he never really did express any opinion about what Nashe thinks about Hamlet. Perhaps Harvey's using these because he knows Nashe just hates Hamlet, so he's using these Hamlet jabs. But then why the hell would Nashe use a Hamlet jab back at him if he hates it so much? Okay, maybe it's just so popular that that's the play to reference. But where are all the to be or not to be jokes in the other plays and the other pamphlets? We don't see them till in the 1600s. So what's happening? Well, we do see a few Hamlet references. Once again, there's no reason to say that that those Hamlet references are to a Shakespeare play. We have plenty of evidence of non-Shakespeare plays that are pretty much the early version of a Shakespeare play. So it's still incredibly unclear. Now, let's all be honest. Dennis is doing this so he can pull Hamlet back to 1550 whatever, so that he can say Thomas North wrote it right after he wrote Prince of Dial. Why he'd write the same fucking play twice is beyond you and me. But maybe Dennis has got something in his back pocket somewhere. But let's get rid of Dennis. He's not good at what he tries to do. Let's move on to maybe somebody who's at least better at making it look like he's good at what he's trying to do. Let's go to maybe Gary Taylor. And we do not have to read this because I know this has been going on. I definitely wanted to go a little more line by line with Dennis.
I also have the whole book that this thing is from, actually, too.
Okay, and Brady's actually read this one, so maybe I'll let Brady give some thoughts because I've been yakking for a while.
Oh, what does he say? He says that essentially Gary Taylor is going to say that. I'll read the abstract first. So yeah, Gary Taylor is going to say in this abstract, this article proposes that Quarter One Hamlet is best understood as an early Gothic tragedy. It connects Catherine Belsey's work on Shakespeare's indebtedness to old wives' tales and winter tales about ghosts, with Terry Boris as evidence of Quarter One's connections to Stratford-upon-Avon, the 1580s, and the beginnings of Shakespeare's London career. It conducts a systematic lexical investigation of Quarter One's Scene 14, not present in Quarter 2 or the Folio, showing that the scene's language is indisputably Shakespearean. It connects the dramaturgy of Quarter 1 to the dramaturgy of Titus Andronicus, particularly in terms of issues about the staging of violence. Previously explored by Stanley Wells, it also shows that Titus and Quarter 1 Hamlet share an unusual interest in the barbarity and vengefulness of Gothic Europe, including Denmark and Norway. I like all the Gothic references of other authors, because he'll kind of I think he's got a quote by Voltaire kind of calling a Hamlet Gothic or something like that. But yeah, he'll kind of say basically that there's a particular scene that's in the characterization of the Gertrude character, Hamlet's mom, is a little different. It's a little more in line with maybe the original Bella Forrest translation, in that she and subtle changes in that when Hamlet is talking to his ghost dad and our folio, I think he literally says something like, oh, that pernicious woman or something like that, right? So he is basically, because he even kind of is like pondering at the beginning of the play, like, dude, why is my mom like getting married on my dad's corpse? He's barely even in the ground. But in this earlier quarter one version, he is literally it's a little more just focused on his uncle, right? So there's not as much like character tension between Hamlet and his mom, and I think it's even like his mom is straight up like, I didn't know about any of this murder stuff, and too. So it's a little more nuanced maybe with the quarter two and the folio version, and that they kind of put Gertrude in a pickle here, in that, or at least the tension in the pickle, that because it's very ambiguous, I would say, in the folio. In our sort of canonical version of Shakespeare, you don't really know if she was in on it. You really know what she really knows by the end of the whole play, right? I would kind of argue, or I think that's definitely how it's argued in a sense. And he'll kind of go into these different versions of that. The ghost characterization of King Hamlet is a little different, perhaps as well, or that he tries to say something like that the Nashe quorum, Nashe and these other quote unquote burgeoning middle class sort of aesthetics are poo-pooing old wives' tales and all these other things, and that Shakespeare must be remember his grandmama doing these ghost stories, and that's what
You can't make this shit up.
Because he'll say that the Senecan ghost, it does not really have the same kind of effect on a character dramaturgically, I guess, in that in a Senecan Roman tragedy or something, that the ghost kind of pops on the scene and is kind of like there, but you don't have this quite the same kind of character interaction, perhaps, with the a live character, and kind of interacting with the ghost and getting all spooked out. Whereas obviously in Shakespeare's Hamlet, King Hamlet, it's like spooking people left and right, from Horatio to Hamlet himself, and so that quarter one, since it doesn't have these more nuanced takes on it or something, that must be written in earlier Shakespeare's career. So therefore, he's obviously going to be, reworking it, which Chance and I would probably also not disagree there in this idea that Hamlet is definitely reworked over. It's almost like engineered for longevity and continuity, right? Therefore this young Shakespeare is probably the one who did maybe write that 89 Shakespeare or whatever, or something along those lines, and that he just kept making it better, and just getting more mature, and able to better make this dramaturgical relationship with Gertrude, and change, and that's why Nashe is denouncing this this Senecan version or Senecan tragedy of dropping whole Hamlet tragic speeches, because it's kind of dumb or low class to kind of have ghosts in this manner, which doesn't make any sense, because it's just like, what, Nashe, the guy who wrote the whole poem about a dildo, is gonna like poo-poo some guy writing a version about a specific version about a ghost story? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No,
that's
really don't.
That's kind of the gist of what I remember from
the guy that wrote Terrors of the Night is gonna poo-poo a ghost story. That's fucking stupid, Gary. So here's my thing with Gary. There's a giant bucket of salt that we need to consider with this essay. Gary's not just writing this essay because he believes these things. Gary is 100% writing this essay as an attack and as a full frontal assault to his nemesis and rival, Sir Brian Vickers. Because Brian Vickers is the kid guy. For the last 20 years, those two's careers have been built on being opposed to the other, to the point where both of them are just more opposed to the other than actually cooking up any decent theories. And they've both made a joke of themselves, and they've kind of ruined the entire Shakespeare attribution industry. I'm not joking. I'm not being hyperbolic. They have absolutely fucked the entire Shakespeare attribution industry, and nobody knows what to say anymore, because both of them have overclaimed so far to justify their own methodologies. Because what the real divide is about is about how to use computers to figure out Shakespeare and Elizabethan literature. And Vickers says we got to use this plagiarism software to check for collocations, which is basically we just need to find a big group of words. And within that group of words, we need to find common words that are in this group, and then from one play, and then in this group from another play. And when they match up, that's when you have the same author. What Gary Taylor does is like, no, you can't do collocations because that could just pull up any sort of random parallel or borrowing. That's not going to help you. What you got to do is engrams. You got to do word counts. And so we need to go find every combination of 3 consecutive words in one play and match it against every consecutive 3-word combination in another play or in every other play. And whichever play or plays pop up with the most consecutive matching 3-word sections, that's your playwright. And ironically, Vickers and Freebury Jones with their collocation methods will tell you engrams don't work. That's just going to show you borrowing and parallel. And so their complaints against each other's methodologies are the same complaints, and neither of them are surefire, but both of their careers are absolutely dependent upon these methodologies, not just their careers, but now legacies, since they're both getting up there. Vickers more so than Taylor. And so what we have right here is Gary Taylor double, triple, quadrupling down on his methodologies, double, triple, quadrupling down on attacking anything that Brian Vickers says, which includes attributing an Ur-Hamlet to Kidd. And so what this is really about is this is an Arden of Faversham argument, because that's what all of their arguments have revolved around. Like, yeah, they have arguments about Edward III, they have arguments about Henry VI, but it's the Arden of Faversham that has been the thing that's been keeping this battle going on and on. And so Gary Taylor's already pretty notorious for taking his own creativity and ideas and just thinking he can fucking make it into existence. And so this is one of the absolute worst cases of Gary Taylor coming up with creative, non-thought of ideas, trying to weave them together into a cohesive argument, and then trying to couple all those qualitative arguments with quantitative arguments to seal the deal. And so his qualitative arguments are insanely weird in this one. They're insanely weird. His arguments are that because Shakespeare does not have the typical Senecan ghost, he must not be getting influenced by Kidd at all, and that it must be his grandmother's old wives' tales influencing him. Now that's some straight up Stratfordian dog shit. That is opium for the masses. That's absurd. And so why he's doing that, though, is he's trying to pitch himself within a feminist argument. He's trying to argue against the patriarchy within the Shakespearean departments and universities, both contemporary and historically, and that Hamlet's this total boys' club play.
Does not uphold the male elite values of their own classical education, says Nashe, literally like the lowest poem pedigree person like in this whole scene, right. Actually.
And honestly, I think there's one that goes even lower, and that's going to be Thomas Heywood. Thomas Heywood's like literally an actor writer. He's not even some university guy. Like, he may have gone to university. I'm not sure if he got a degree or not. But yeah, he's an actor writer. He's the youngest of the bunch, and Gary Taylor's one of his own partners in the New Oxford Shakespeare Collective is John Jowett. Let's see, I got some Jowett on the shelf. Jowett edits my Art and Shakespeare of Sir Thomas More. Jowett is actually a big-time non-Shakespeare expert. He's specifically like Chettle, Heywood. He does some others too, but Chettle and Heywood are his big ones. Hence, he does Sir Thomas More Monday as well. But Jowett has another essay, which, yeah, honestly, we can be done with Gary Taylor because his quantitative argument, it's like 10 pages.
Yeah.
But there's not a fucking single chart. And so, like, if you're showing quantitative, give me a chart. Don't make me read stuff. And if you're going to make me read stuff, please give me examples within the quantitative so I can see the sort of value of them. And in those 10 pages, he provides one single quote, and it's like, well, dude, this isn't much. His one single quote was that in Shakespeare's Henry III, we have somebody say, "I take my leave and 1,000 thanks,"
Mm-hmm.
and then in the Court of One, it says, "I take my leave, 1,000 blessings," or something like that. And so it's like, yeah, that could be the same hand, or it could be just anybody that read Henry VI and appropriated that line, or it's really not that crazy of a line. It's just, I take my leave. Plenty of people say that, and plenty of people say 1,000. The two of them together makes it unique, but there's only one other example in Shakespeare. Who knows that Shakespeare uses it that often? Maybe Shakespeare only used it once, and somebody else only used it once. The odds of that really isn't any different than Shakespeare using it twice and nobody using it. They're all incredibly minimalistic odds that we can get no statistical certainty from a comparison like that. And so what he does is he mounts up all these other comparisons that he doesn't fucking show us, and he says, "Look, it's not just this one; it's all these others." Which I'm sure if he showed you all those others, they'd be not convincing whatsoever, which is why he didn't list them. But yeah, Vickers and Darren Freebury Jones have since responded to this essay and said, "Dude, I tried doing what you did. I couldn't do it. I think you're bullshitting."
Yeah.
And yeah, Taylor and Egan have been called out by Vickers and Freebury Jones, and specifically Risby, who's more of a math guy than an English guy. But Risby, since he knows the math so well, he can show everybody, like, dude, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And yeah, they've actually caught them flubbing before, and I think it was for a Henry VI play. And so, yeah, like, if you're not going to really give me any examples, then I don't really care what you did with your stylistic evidence. If I can't go in and recreate it myself, which I personally don't have the technology, but theoretically, if I did, I should be able to recreate it, but I probably wouldn't be able to. That's sort of what's at hand here. So just giant grain of salt. But yeah, Gary is vociferously trying to argue that the 89 version is Shakespeare, and it's been Shakespeare the whole time.
Yep.
But yeah, as I brought up, John Jowett, we can move to his essay, and we won't have to read the whole thing at all. But John Jowett has an essay saying, well, I think actually Thomas Kidd wrote at least one speech in Cordo 1 of Hamlet. So the 1603 bad Cordo, the 1603 bad Hamlet, at least one speech, which is the warm clown speech, which is not in the other Cordo or folio, that must actually be Thomas Heywood, which sort of brings a whole circle of ideas back. Because if old Dingleberry Taylor is going to say that this is all about giving women voices, well, there's no better person, even including John Webster, even including Mary Sidney. They're really, including Mary Sidney Roth or Amelia Lanier. There is no better writer in English drama for giving voice to women than Thomas Kidd. Okay. His most famous play. What is his most famous play? What's it say? A Woman Killed with Kindness. Almost like a female victim character. Almost like Gertrude is the victim of this setup and that we should give her sympathy. That sounds very, very Heywoodian. In fact, Heywood's one of his other great plays, which he has a lot of plays. He's supposed to have written like 220 plays, which we don't have all of them. We have a small margin of that. We have like 40 or something. But yeah, he has another one, Apius in Virginia, and like Apius in Virginia is like a total Titus knockoff in a lot of ways. So if Gary Taylor wants to say that this play is so similar to Titus, perhaps it's by Heywood, who knocks off Titus. Perhaps it's by Heywood, who writes about women. Perhaps your co-worker, John Jowett, even has an argument for such a thing. And people like, Heywood's supposed to be like a Jacobean and Carolinian writer. Yeah, and he's also supposed to be an Elizabethan writer. We just don't have his plays from that era. Heywood did not print his plays commonly till late in his career. He's famous for eschewing the printing. He even says that he eschews the printing in Apology for Actors. But any actual Heywood scholar knows that he's in London by 1594, and most think that he is writing for the theaters by 1594. And he himself basically says as much. He says, my Four Apprentices in London was done all the way back in the early 90s. And so, yeah, but I mean, I'm throwing a lot of names out here. Chance, these are a lot of names. Well, yeah, we also have a lot of plays. We got an 89 play, a 94 play, a 1603 version, a 1604 version. And let me see. Are we in the John Jowett?
No, I'm
Play?
still in the. I'm still scrolling
Okay.
through the Gary one now while you were finishing up here.
Yeah.
And he makes some other claim that that it must be written around the same time as Titus Andronicus because one of the characters mentions what's the chick? What's Titus's daughter's name? There's a line about someone saying
Lavinia.
I remember Lavinia being able to play the lute or the flute or something, and that there's a line in Hamlet where, or there was a stage direction maybe where Ophelia comes in playing like a lute or something too, and it's just like okay.
Okay, yeah. What the hell's that got to do with anything? Why would that happen?
And he's like,
Show me any
well,
other
what about
example.
this chance? In Denmark, they all think of them as the Goths, and that who are the bad guys in Titus Andronicus? It's the Goths, that's some of his other.
No, dude, I totally agree. Locrine was actually a canonical Shakespeare play. Bertha Merlin was a canonical Shakespeare play. Oh, wait. Oh, we're not saying that because those use the word goths all over the place. Man, fuck yourself, Taylor. What a stupid, like piece of shit argument. Like, who would buy this? This is some shit you'd see in like a magazine at the barber shop or something. Like, I went into Great Clips and I opened up a magazine and Gary Taylor had his dumbass Shakespeare article. Like,
before we continue, I should answer Floating Holmes' question though, because he says, "So wait, you think Nash is not referencing a William Shakespeare Hamlet in 1589, right?"
So I definitely don't think it's Shakespeare Stratford man. It very well could be Shakespeare in the sense that it is an early version of either Quarto 1 or Quarto 2, but probably Quarto 1's been the argument. I'm cool with calling it Shakespeare, but it just depends on how we want to define that.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that Kid could have a hand in it because that's what Kid did at that point. Kid does get brought up in that, but that Nash does use that word imitator for a reason. And so I do think that he could very well be pointing to somebody other than Kid writing that 89 play. I don't think that there's any reason from that text alone to say Shakespeare from Stratford or just Shakespeare in general. There's nothing about shaking or spearing, and Stratford man was not a noverant, no matter what kind of 1580s mythology they want to build up for him. What I think could be the case is it could be a shot at Anthony Munday. Anthony Munday actually fits the description. And we do know that Nash took pot shots at Munday elsewhere. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but Munday is the one that shits out pamphlets all the time. Munday does have a hand writing plays. In fact, that's the whole thing about Sir Thomas More is that Munday is hand S, which people argue whether hand S is actually fully Munday or if that's Munday just copying Chettle and other people's works. So it's possible that there's a Munday pot shot in here. Nobody's considered that. But I'm also, like, once again of the opinion that
it
seems like Nash and Greene,
like it's like Nash is maybe shitting on like the straight to DVD bin kind of rehashing or something,
and yeah, like it definitely seems like that's how it's like presented. I gotta say that there's got to be a little bit of tongue in cheek here because it's Nash and Greene at the height of the Marprelate pamphlets, where they vociferously defend the theaters and attack the people attacking the theaters, and then here in this text, they're kind of being super critical about the theaters. And so, like, I don't know what exactly to do with that tongue in cheekness, but I would just leave it open that this could be a reference to anything. At some point, Nash gets spotted in Henry VI Part 1 because he makes a reference to a character, and he makes a reference to Talbot from Henry VI Part 1, and that's when people are like, wait, he's praising Talbot here. Maybe he wrote that passage. perhaps we have some inverted version here in Menaphon that he's shitting on a passage that he wrote, and maybe that's part of the joke. Maybe
Because
he's
it
not a
could be
fan of
something
it.
like, oh yeah, people, you kind of, yeah, you put your, a staged version or something out there, and then you just see, knockoffs of the same thing, and and hence, uh, yeah, not like being associated with that sort of thing, and that, or something along those lines, right?
That or like honestly, like I'm thinking Jim Thompson. Like go to my bookshelf here. Um, I don't have all of Jim Thompson, but I got
Shout
a lot
out
of
to
Jim
our
Thompson.
True Detective stream we did on that too.
So there's my Jim Thompson list. These are all crime novels that are all the colored ones. This is his only non-crime novel, but that's his second novel. His first novel he ever wrote, he took it out of printing. He was so embarrassed of his first novel, which was a war novel, that he literally said, I want my name taken from it. I do not want it ever printed again. I disclaim that novel. Um, I don't know that Nash is going that far here, but if this is, you know, early dramatic effort by Nash, circa 88, 89, which he's not published till 88, so it would very likely be one of his earliest attempts. Uh, Perhaps he's like, yeah, this is really shitty and it's bad kid Seneca knockoff. Hence, it gets reworked and reworked and reworked because he's sort of
Right.
embarrassed of it.
Yeah, you just
But
want to try
that's
to
all
distinct it.
speculation. And it's all super speculative and it's kind of wishy-washy, so it's probably not the exact conclusion that may satisfy. But at some point, at least, it gets towards why is Nash the source for all the Hamlet quotes? Why is Nash the one that the Hamlet discussion is revolving around? Especially if none of us are actually considering Nash as author. We're saying Kyd, we're saying Shakespeare. Haywood gets brought up. North, DeVere, Mary Sidney. Is anybody saying Nash or Greene for that matter?
I've got
Um,
one more. I've got a good Nash footnote to drop on this after this essay, maybe.
okay, and we can do the Jout one real quick because it's really just going over one speech. Uh, you can skip ahead. I wish I read this one today, so I remembered. I read this one weeks ago. Uh, so he's talking about is it memorial construction? Is it not memorial construction? I think everybody's sort of moved away from memorial construction and that it's not a super helpful thing to try and do stuff to date. Um, I think a lot of people have found that there's a lot of reasons to not go the memorial construction, that Cordo 1 feels more cohesive in some ways than the actual good Cordo. Like where the to be or not to be speech is in the Cordo 1 actually makes sense. It makes way more sense than in Cordo 2. And because of that, some people when they stage Hamlet, they'll actually stage the to be or not to be speech where it is in Cordo 1 rather than the good Cordo. So it's like if that's a bootleg, then why are we using that over the actual textual one? Well, it's because it makes better sense.
Hmm.
It gives a little more context to his speech. Whereas, yeah, in the good Hamlet, he's already there. He's already given the speech.
Right.
We're like an act two or whatever. Like what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, I
Um,
totally thought it was later on, and yeah, no, it's like much more early on. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a lot of reasons I think that may happen. And that's for another video because like we could literally talk about the the structuring of Hamlet till the cows come home. I think.
Oh, we'll do that. We're definitely gonna do a lot of Hamlet, I think, coming up.
Okay. An initial test of engrams. So he's using the same exact test as Gary Taylor would. An initial test of engrams using the drama section of the online database of the Literature Online. I think that's the Chadwick Healy Lion um, database. Plays Shakespeare third out of 13. I think that says 13. I think so. Let's see more. Yeah,
Yeah,
13
13.
dramatists who wrote a substantial number of mini solo authored plays and who were working in the period between 87 and 03. This is an immediately significant result. The dramatists who scored marginally higher, so only marginally, but honestly, scoring higher than Shakespeare at all in any of these word tests is a fucking miracle as far as I'm concerned. So like when you outscore Shakespeare, you should really be heavily considered. The dramatists who scored marginally higher than Shakespeare were Thomas Haywood and Ben Jonson, who both totaled 34 hits or tokens, unique uh, words or combinations of words, as against Shakespeare's 32. But the results look as though they're extremely sensitive to canon size. Yeah, hence the miracle. And the Shakespeare dramatic canon significantly exceeds those of all other playwrights. And so this is the problem with engram testing. This is the problem with word counting, is that it always privileges the larger canon, and Shakespeare always has the larger canon.
Yeah.
There are people that technically wrote more plays than him, but none of those plays are securely attributed enough to use all of them. Like Thomas Dekker, for instance, wrote way more than Shakespeare. We don't have all of them. We only have like 20-ish of them. But even within the 20, half of them are like more than half are co-written by several other people. We can't exactly piece, which part's Dekker, which part's not. Nobody's done that dirty work. So we can't use a bunch of Dekker plays to try and find Dekker. It's way worse for people like Michael Drayton, who has 0 plays, Henry Chettle, who has 1, but everybody calls that, sorry, he has 2. He has Patient Grisel and Hoffman's Tragedy. And, Hoffman's Tragedy is a bootleg, or it looks like a really bad printing, so hard to use anything. And then Patient Grisel is co-written with Dekker and Houghton. So we can't really test Chettle.
And even as Taylor also admitted, like, oh yeah, Nash, some of the Nash stuff is not even available on like these searches either. So yeah, like, how do you even know if it's even available in these search engines?
Nash has only 1 play, and it's not even a commercial play. So Nash super is hurt by this. Nash just has Summer's Last Will and Testament. You can use Act 1 of Henry VI, Part 1, to try and test for Nash, but it's still only 1 act, and that's still technically not fully consensus. I think a lot of people are cool with it at this point. It's pretty damn close. But yeah, because of that, these engrams, you just always end up with Shakespeare, Jonson, maybe not Fletcher, but just Fletcher has a ton of plays, but Fletcher has his own set of words, so he never comes up. But Greene only has a handful of plays. Marlowe only has a handful of plays, but they'll pop up at least because they're handfuls somewhat securely. Like Kidd only has Spanish Tragedy securely attributed to him, unless you ask Brian Vickers, who will tell you, no, it's like 7 or 8 plays that we should attribute to Kidd. And then as soon as you attribute those 7 or 8 plays, guess what? He gets way more hits because there's way more to get hits with. It's a fucked system.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, but the results look as though they're extremely sensitive to canon size. The results were particularly erratic for smaller canons. Arithmetical adjustments of the figures to offset canon size can only exaggerate this unreliability. The preliminary test suggests that a moderately high score is needed for any test along these lines to begin to function. Although several other dramatists, including Chapman and Dekker, would score more highly than Shakespeare if the numbers were adjusted to reflect canon size, attention must be confined to Haywood and Jonson. Jonson is certainly a more plausible author of the passage than Shakespeare, and in many respects an attractive contender. To give just one example, he writes the two-word combination, my porridge, co-located, so nearby, with references to, quote, your eating player and, quote, apparel. His use of the word collison will be considered further below. So this is Jowett taking the exact same evidence that old Dingleberry Dennis used, and Jowett's going to come up with an entirely different conclusion, right? But when Jonson is assessed against Shakespeare in the way described for Haywood, the number of engrams exclusive to Shakespeare proves to be significantly higher than with Haywood. It is therefore Haywood who is examined in more detail below. Obviously, the combination of strong results and conventional testability of Haywood as the author of a substantial canon offers no guarantee that a less prolific writer did not contribute the passage. However, there are a number of factors relating to biography style and ideation that make Haywood a plausible contender. In the weeks between November 24, 1602 and January 7, 1603, Haywood, at this time a leading member of Worcester's men, was writing a play called The Blind Eats Many a Fly, the title being a proverbial tag very similar to as the blind man catcheth a hare. Haywood was responsible by his own account for, quote, an entire hand or at least a main figure in 220 plays. Most important, he was a specialist in writing dialogue for clowns, which I've said this on many videos of ours, like going back years, going back to almost some of the first videos. I've said, if you're reading a clown scene in Shakespeare, it's probably Haywood, which Sir Thomas More, even though it's a history play, guess what it's got? It's got a fucking clown in it. And guess who writes that scene? Haywood. And it's not just that it's attributed to Haywood, it's in Haywood's fucking handwriting. Haywood wrote it. And I'm of the opinion that Haywood probably wrote several other clowns in Shakespeare. I don't know that all of them, but definitely think that he's the reason we have a clown in Lear. Who just disappeared.
Joked earlier that we have to drink every time you hold up the Thomas More play, so I keep reminding him to drink.
Okay. A short sample from a speech of the clown bets in Haywood's revision of "Take a drink, motherfucker." Sir Thomas More, probably executed in about 1603 or 4. So John Jowett doesn't mean the man Sir Thomas More was executed in 1603 or 4. He was executed like 100 years before that. He means that the play was performed and written around that time. So Jowett is one of my favorites because he is one of the few saying a late date for Sir Thomas More. And incidentally, so is Gary Taylor. Gary Taylor's one of the other few that's saying a late date for Sir Thomas More. And I really like what they say about Sir Thomas More, way more than what someone like Melchiori or somebody else that's dating it to like 93 would say. At least the revision parts, which would include Haywood. But yeah, I think Jowett also argues in here that the non-revision parts are also late, probably 1600. Gary Taylor says as late as 1604. I'm cool with either. It keeps it in the Henslow diary, or it keeps it in the Henslow hands. It's not in the Henslow diary, though. Okay. Shows language similar to that in Quarter One's description of the Warm Clown. Quote, come, we'll tickle the turnips. We'll butter their boxes. Shall strangers rule the roast? Yes, we'll baste the roast. Come, a flaunt, a flaunt. Here, too, we see the expression of resentment and social conflict in terms of symptomatic foodstuffs and self-expression by way of repeating quasi-proverbial phrases. The traits of referencing homely food and quoting proverbs are thoroughly typical of Haywood's clowns. So are references to parts of the face. Quote, charge me to the mouth. I will set out a throat, from lip to lip and from nose to nose, and to apparel. And as sweet as the old sweet still, and as close the old close. So the verbal register fits well. Haywood also wrote against the dull clown. This hob and all, this rustic, this base clown, I find him of a dull and brainless eye, such as I know golden head and shaft will never enter, of a skin so thick as pointed silver has no power to pierce. You can keep scrolling, that's just him. He refers to surly clowns. 'Tis hard to teach them manners that are clowns, and to a clown being paid wages. Madam, I have a year's wages beforehand. His clown might also drink beer. Quote, why, ale is a kind of juice made of the precious grain called malt. What is malt? Malt's M-A-L-T. And what is M-A-L-T? M, much. A, ale, little, T, thirst. That is much ale, little thirst. That should give me a pot of ale that should drink to me and drink up all. Haywood associates a clown specifically with writing tables. Quote, enter the clown with his table books. Indeed, the title page engraving, A Maidenhead Well Lost, illustrates figures from the play, including the clown actually carrying writing tables in his hand. And it was Haywood who famously complained when one of his own plays was, as he says, published in a bad text taken down in the theater by the shorthand technique of stenography. But ill nursed, and yet received as well performed at first, graced and frequented for the cradle age, did throng the seats, the boxes, and the stage, so much that some by stenography drew the plot, put it in print, scarce one word true. And in that laminesse it hath limped so long, the author now to vindicate that wrong hath took the pains upright upon its feet to teach it walk, so please you sit and seat. Haywood was therefore prolific as a bit writer, specialist on clown roles, and commentator on the uses of both writing tables and stenography in the theater. Nothing is yet proved by this evidence, but without detailed reference to quantifiable links, Haywood already begins to look more plausible as the author than Shakespeare, and there are grounds to justify further inquiry, given that mode of writing in Hamlet's words about the warm clown is deficient in Shakespearean phrasing. Might they be positively Haywoodian? Okay, you can scroll a little bit because he's just going to talk about his engram procedure, which he's much more careful to explain than Taylor was in his last essay. That's the difference between British and American, honestly. Okay. Keep going. Okay, see charts. You see that, folks? See that? Okay. So here are words or phrases that are in Shakespeare but not in Haywood. Trippingly, robustious, pated, and begit, terre, to vary, split thee, it to you, it is many, nor do not, hand thus but, soul to hear. In Haywood but not Shakespeare. Tatters. That's interesting. Tatters is not in Shakespeare. To split, it offends. May give it, the soul to, who for the, and as I may. In this passage, the engram types favor Shakespeare by 7 and Haywood to 12 in Shakespeare. The tokens produce a clear differentiation of 12 in Haywood to 24 in Shakespeare. The tokens is when you count up how many times they're each used. The Shakespearean token cluster in 2 types, it to you and to split. The Haywood control passage was selected from a small menu of uninterrupted speeches by a clown. The first 113 words, thus to be sampled or modernized from the quarto text, are, let his virtue speak for himself. He hath taught his people to sow, to plow, to reap corn, to scorn acorns with their heels, to bake and to brew. We that want to drink nothing but water have the bravest liquor at court as passive. Besides, he hath devised a strange engine called a bow and arrow, that a man may hold in hand and kill a wild beast a great way off, never come in danger of his clutches. I'll tell you a strange thing, nurse. Last time the king went to hunting, he killed a bear, brought him home to be baked and eaten. A gentlewoman of the court, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, notice we have the food. We have, okay, yeah, here we go. In Haywood, but not Shakespeare. So this is the Haywoodian control passage. And so, yeah, naturally they should all be in Haywood, but a lot of these are not in Shakespeare. But of those, there are some that are in Shakespeare, but not Haywood. The test yields 23 types and 29 tokens for Haywood, is against 11 types in an actual Haywood passage that he's quoting, and we're still finding a bunch of words in Shakespeare that are not in Haywood. So even within Haywood's own works, Shakespeare tests better than Haywood. What the fuck does that mean? Right? All right, here we get a Taylor reference. When Gary Taylor ran a comparable control test to investigate passages of Shakespeare and Middleton, the text produced the anticipated result for the Shakespeare passage, but failed to identify the Middleton passage as Middleton. These are inherent limits to the testing that can be employed on a short passage, but Taylor was able, nevertheless, to persevere with his test to identify the hand of Middleton in a short passage of Macbeth, which, grain of salt. Gary, this is something I should have mentioned while we were on the Gary Taylor thing, but he's a big fan of what he calls microattribution, which he completely made up, and he's the only person that uses it. So in that passage, he has a whole page talking about microattribution and all its uses, and he has these footnotes to show you that these are real beliefs that people have. But if you go look at the footnotes, guess who he's quoting? He's quoting himself. So yeah, I don't know, that's just a little kind of gross as far as academic essays go. If you're quoting yourself half the time, it's not really an academic essay. Yeah, scroll a little farther. I don't want to keep us too much longer. I literally could do this for 10 more hours, though, honest to God. Yeah, scroll a little farther. And honestly, probably can just scroll to the bottom. We'll just read his conclusion. Oh, my bad. Here, let's look at one more chart. Let's look at that chart. Charts are fun. Okay, counts and percentages of engrams and control passages in the Warm Clown passage. And so we just have all these different percentages. And yeah, notice when we do this test with Shakespeare, this is what the percentages look like. 30% with Heywood. And then when we look at a Heywood one, about 60% go to Heywood. And then when we look at the Warm Clown speech, about 60% go to Heywood. So it's looking pretty identical as far as that goes. Maybe he's gamed the stats to make it look like that, but he's being much more transparent here than say Taylor was in that previous essay, or honestly most stylometricians are. Like he's being very visual with this data and he's explaining it in detail. You can scroll to the bottom, I guess, because yeah, this one's a long one. Even though he's just going over one speech, which is it's really how nasty it can get.
Let me zoom out. Should I just try to find his conclusion? Author versus date.
Yeah. And I super recommend people checking out the essays that were shown. They're all free on JSTOR. I only have free books. I only got free JSTOR access, so that's how I read them. So I know y'all can read them. Okay, the evidence that potentially distinguished Heywood from Shakespeare was considered on the assumption that the findings would be congruent with a premise relating to authorship, and so it proved. However, attribution study is always haunted by the specter of alternative explanations relating to intertextual influences arising for reasons that do not relate to common authorship. Borrowing, commonplace, stealing, anything, accidental coincidence. Though it has been demonstrated elsewhere that such explanations do not invalidate attribution study, they may nevertheless play a supplementary role. In addressing potential counter-evidence that runs against the main flow of the findings, this paper has put pressure on the question of whether a rare word connecting the passage to Shakespeare text might, in definable circumstances, symptomize the intertextual currency of a moment in time rather than shared authorship. The affirmative answer offered here is based not on unqualified speculation, but on detailed consideration of qualitative difference between a marker of authorship and a marker of appropriation. Hence, the analysis has been refined by the observation that whereas authorship is the most widely prevalent cause of affinity between the passage from Q1 and one authorial canon against another, an individual word or phrase can sometimes be explained in terms of its topicality or currency, notwithstanding the premise to its authorship embedded in the corpora which the passage is compared. This is especially likely with a conscious stylistic choice of a modus single word as syncopace or colocin. Thus, we now have two hypotheses. The first one, from the perspective of authorship, the passage is distinctly more like Heywood than Shakespeare. Two, from the perspective of chronology, it contains idioms that distinctly belong to the period immediately leading up to 1602. These statements recognize the primacy of authorship as the single most powerful generator of textual parallels, while revealing that another secondary factor is also operative. The second hypothesis is important because the attribution of the passage to Shakespeare depends by common consent on an early dating. In another paper, I have pointed out that Roberts, who entered Hamlet in the Stationer's Register, held two patents, one for printing playbills, the other for printing almanacs and prognostications. Up until about 1601, the latter had given him control over production and distribution of writing tables, the very artifacts that would most conveniently have been used for note-taking in the theater. In this context, the locution about tables in Hamlet's Q1 Warm Clown speech, quote, quotes his jests down in their tables before they come to the play, is telling as a verbal formula potentially bearing the trace not simply of authorship or date, but of the mode of textual transmission that led to the Q1 text. Shakespeare refers to tables in the sense of writing tables in 7 instances, 2 of which occur memorably in Hamlet itself. Yea, from my table of memory, I'll wipe away all trivial fond records. My tables, meet. It is, I set it down. Thus, Q2, or Quarto 2, in the text reads similarly in both Quarto 1 and Folio. But Quarto 1's additional reference to writing tables used specifically in a theatrical context. Keep scrolling. Okay. Offers a particularly and unnervingly close echo of the textual technology most plausibly used for the compilation of the Quarto 1 text. Tiffany Stern has argued persuasively for the use of writing tables in the theater. In the clown passage, Hamlet suggests that gentlemen have recorded the clown's jests and their tables before they go to see his performance. What was once noteworthy is now lamely familiar. This account turns on its head the more routine practice, well illustrated in Stern's paper, whereby audience members would write striking sentences spoken on stage into their pocket writing tables, or their commonplace book. In this case, the inscription precedes the theater visit. Or the clown himself inscribes his jokes as an aide de memory, like Roland's fellow like a clown that knew all points in his tables, or Heywood's clown, quote, with his table books. In either case, Hamlet's words invoke a scenario in which the author of the passage might betray some knowledge as to the source of the text he was amplifying. Single test cannot be conclusive, but the quantitative difference between the locutions specific to Heywood and specific to Shakespeare is strong. Some of the evidence goes beyond merely differentiating between Heywood and Shakespeare and links up with the initial scoping test and showing that the Heywood profile is distinct in relation to all dramatists. 4 engram types and 7 tokens are found in Heywood, but in the dramatic works of no other identifiable dramatist working in the professional theater in the years from 86 to 03. Some again, 4 in Heywood, unless by chance your beer, my man, is known by. Keep scrolling. Shakespeare has a single, cannot you stay? Another 2 Heywood engrams used by only 1 other dramatist before they come to the Nashe. And quarters wages, Henry Porter. Super shout out. By the way, guys, I think Henry Porter may actually be in Shakespeare. I know that sounds stupid and crazy, but Comedy of Errors is where I see Porter. This confirms that the initial selection of Heywood moved in the right direction. Why anyone at all would have penned the lines is a difficult question. They scarcely represent even what Heywood called a main finger. You can scroll down. Is it conceivable that the passage is not a work of professional dramatists, that it is merely more Heywoodian than it is Shakespearean? Perhaps, as a compendium of catchphrases, it does not require an author. After all, the lines under examination amplify Hamlet's critique of extemporary speech by a clown. As Leo Marcus intriguingly suggested, the very point after these lines, where Quarto 1 becomes independent of the familiar Shakespearean script, it shifts into precisely a non-authorial kind of extemporary utterance. Gentlemen actually write the stuff down. Perhaps the first time the words have seen paper. I suggest instead, but comparably, that the Warm Clown passage is a kind of hot spot of textual transmission, referencing note-taking as well as extemporization and recirculation of a text as challenges to the very premise that a printed text will safely be grounded in authorial script. Which, who would have those anxieties more than anybody? Yeah, it would be Thomas Heywood. I'm skipping down, but the real conclusion pertains more to the negative diagnosis. The Heywoodian qualities are, above all else, a measure of the extent to which the passage is un-Shakespearean. Furthermore, to set aside the authorial criterion entirely, these lines have special specific positive similarities with the dramatic writing of around 1602. Stern's account for the techniques of noting others of a compelling explanation as to why Shakespeare's most ambitious and aesthetically complex recent play should have been printed in 1603, in a text that slithers unnervingly between lines reflecting irreconcilable attributes, the extraordinary poetic heights of the dramatist style as it had emerged in the late 1590s, a distorted and disconcerting shadow of that same style that tends to trail off into banality, conventionality, and even semi-coherence, and as we may now add, a passage that bears no resemblance to Shakespeare's writing at any point in his career. The present paper is not itself a demonstration that such transmission through note-taking took place, and indeed is consistent with any theory of disruptive transmission. What is demonstrated here is that Heywood, or someone remarkably like Heywood, added a short passage to a pre-existing text. It would be hard to dissociate the Warm Clown edition from the wider, hearty Shakespearean quality of Q1, which calls for a strong explanation of the text in its entirety. Moreover, in a context where the disruptive transmission is considered likely, practice of note-taking in the theater is mentioned in the passage itself suggests a connection between its content and its transmission. This is consistent with the passage being written after the rest of the play had undergone disruptive transmission to reach its form as in other respects given in Q1. Stern's case, reinforced by my own study of James Roberts, enables us to understand how Q1 text might have been transmitted in a disrupted form at precisely the time when, as I propose here, the clown passage was first added. Shakespeare's Hamlet did not mock the warm clown. The end. Yeah, sorry guys, I did not mean to go as much into detail as that, but I wanted to show that this really is a much more careful or thoughtful essay. He's only keen in on one speech, so the rest of the play is still up for grabs. But that one speech did show probably Haywood, probably 1602, definitely not like Gary Taylor saying where it's pure Shakespeare, and definitely not like like McCarthy is saying that it's pure whatever. I would like to suggest that, yeah, that one passage seemed obviously Haywoodian because it's easy to spot the clown passages, but it's quite completely possible that he is adding to a play that he was already a part of. And he could have been a part of it as early as 1594, which we know there was a version out by that time. But okay, one more thing I wanted to do before I let any of y'all go, and if y'all are still around, thank you so much. If you're not still around, hello.
Says we still got 9 people watching, so.
Okay, super shout out. Thank you guys. What I want to do is I want to show my own findings in, now this won't be Quarto 1, this is going to be Quarto 2. So this will change a little bit of the arguments. Like this isn't exactly on the same terms of argument as all the rest of the stuff we've been discussing, but since we are talking about dating and Hamlet, I'd like, if possible, can you bring up Act 2, Scene 2 in Hamlet, Brady?
Yes, give me 1 second. Act 2, Scene 2. We're doing it live. I guess Folgers is going to be our winner.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is a
share the
somewhat
screen.
long, this is a somewhat long act or scene rather. So I'm trying to find the exact page. Should have it written down. Okay. Because I'd like to go when Hamlet is talking about the actors and acting company coming to Elsinore. Okay. This is in my text where it like. Let me see. Where do I want to start this?
What line?
Where's it? Like 309. It's Rosencrantz saying to think, my lord. Which, yeah, this is its own joke. Because, Rosencrantz said, my lord, there was no such stuff in my thoughts. And Hamlet said, why did you laugh then when I said, man delights not me? To think, my lord, if you delight not in man, what Lenten entertainment the players shall receive from you. So that was clearly a gay joke, but he twisted it into, you're not going to like the actors when they come. We quoted them on the way, and hither they are coming to offer your service. Hamlet says, he that plays the king shall be welcome. His majesty shall have tribute of me. The adventurous knight shall use his foil and target. What players are they? And then Rosencrantz says, even those you were wont to take delight in, the tragedians of the city. Then Hamlet says, how chances it they travel? Their residence, both in reputation and profit, was better both ways. Rosencrantz says, I think their inhibition comes by the means of the late innovation. Hamlet says, do they hold the same estimation they did when I was in the city, or they so follow? So they're talking about the acting company that's touring at this point, which maybe that does reference something that would happen in '93, and maybe get some points to the '94 dating. But he's specifically talking about yeah, it's basically talking about Lord Chamberlain's men. You can read it as any acting company in England, but then Hamlet asks, "Are they so followed?" And then Rosencrantz says, "No, indeed they're not. So this acting company used to be really popular, but it's not as popular anymore." And then Hamlet says, "Well, how comes it? Do they grow rusty?" And Rosencrantz says, "Nay, their endeavor keeps them in the wonted place, but there is, sir, an eyrie of children, little eyases, that cry out on the top of question and are most tyrannically clapped for. These are now the fashion, and so berattle the common stages, so they call them, that many wearing rapiers are afraid of goose quills and dare scarce come thither." So he's talking about children's companies. And children's companies actually really easily dates this. That means it's either in the 80s with Lily or we're in the 1600s with Marston. It's pretty much that simple. So maybe he's talking about Lily, maybe he's talking about Marston. Let's see. Oops. Do one more pitch. What are they, children? Who maintains them? How are they escorted? Will they pursue the quality no longer than they can sing? Will they not say afterwards if they should grow themselves to common players? So, will those kids not grow up to be actors themselves? Most like, if their means are no better, their writers do them wrong to make them exclaim against their own succession. So, to me, there's a little bit of a joke here. Like, who maintains these children companies? Well, maybe that's a shot at Marston or Lily, the person writing for these children companies. Their writers do them wrong to make them exclaim against their own succession. So, yeah, he's saying these children companies are attacking these adult companies. So this is War of the Theaters, right? This children's company, aka John Marston, and all the War of the Theaters plays that he's writing, are attacking the Chamberlain's company or the Admiral's Men company, where Johnson is writing. Okay? And so he's saying, well, why would these kids attack these older companies if they're just going to become adult actors themselves, right? That seems crazy. And then Rosencrantz says, there has been much to do on both sides, and the nation holds it no sin to tar them to controversy. There was for a while no money bid for argument unless the poet and the player went to cuffs in the question. And that seems to me unambiguously about the War of the Theaters. That's unambiguously about a war in the theaters. There's only one example of that. Now, maybe somebody could try and twist this and say, no, this is actually about Marprelate pamphlets. But what would that have to do with the children's company? Somebody could say, no, this is about Greene with his Grotsworts attack. But what does that have to do with the children's company? It doesn't. This must be War of the Theaters, which War of the Theaters goes from 99 to 1601-ish. It's usually in date marked with Decker's Satyromastics, which is 1601. And so 1601 is when it ends. Well, we have Rosencrantz saying for a while there, all they did was have this War of the Theaters thing. So from 99 to 01, all they did was have War of the Theaters thing, but it's now done. The kids won. Marston won. Okay, and if anybody thinks that I'm stretching, because at that point, we're now dating this to 1602, right? This is 1602 looking back on 1601 and before. And anybody that is not cool with that, let's see if I can take this a little further. God bless America. I lost my page. Okay. Oh, God damn it. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. Is it possible? Oh, there has been much throwing about of brains. Do the boys carry it away? Aye, that they do, my lord. Hercules and his load, too. So the children's companies won. Marston won. Is it not very strange, for mine uncle is king of Denmark, that those would make mouths at him while my father lived, give 20, 40, 50, and 100 ducats a piece for his picture and little? It's blood. There's something in this more than natural if philosophy could find it out. And then we get, these are the players, and then Polonius comes in, and we can skip a little bit down to when Polonius and Hamlet start talking, and Polonius starts basically quoting Philip Sidney here. Hamlet says, then came each actor on his ass. Then Polonius, almost ignoring that. The best actors in the world, either for tragedy, comedy, pastoral, comical, historical, pastoral, tragical, comical, historical, pastoral, scene indivisible, or poem unlimited. Seneca cannot be too heavy, nor Plautus too light. For the law of writ and the liberty, these are the only men. And then there, Hamlet says something funny. Oh, Jephthah, judge of Israel, what a treasure hadst thou! What a treasure had he, my lord? Why, one fair daughter and no more, the which he loved passing well. So Jephthah is my favorite character in the Bible. Maybe second favorite. Job's my favorite. But Jephthah is another Job-type figure. Jephthah makes a deal with God and says, if you help me win this battle, I'll sacrifice the first thing that I see when I get home. And yeah, he wins the battle. And he comes home and his daughter's like, hey, Dad. And he's like, ah, shit. So he kills his daughter, and then God replaces his daughter. Yay. But that is absolute foreshadowing, right? That is absolute foreshadowing on what's going to happen to Ophelia. That said, Polonius is going to die before that. But yeah, he will lose his daughter. But why Jephthah? There's a lot of people that have lost their daughter, right? We could have said Titus Andronicus, right? We could have said like you could even say King Lear. He didn't actually lose his daughter, but he temporarily lost her, right? Oh, sorry, my screen's frozen.
You're good on our side.
Okay. So can you pull up Lost Data Plays database, the Folgers Lost Play database?
Yeah, I have one right here for Hamlet.
Okay. And I think this will bring it up, but actually scroll all the way to the bottom.
Which section?
All the way to the bottom of the website. And then, or scroll to the top. I'm trying to figure out. Just go to the dramatist and go to the, or you can filter this by year. You can filter this by title. You can filter this by dramatist.
Oh, I'm on
the
Hamlet's one. Just go to play titles.
Yeah, don't go to play titles. Go to years.
Years.
And go to 1602.
All right. 1602.
And then if we look at the titles, you can order the titles by alpha, so we don't have to search too far. Oh, what's that in 1602? Is that a play that's called Jephthah? Huh. And who's it by? It's by Thomas Dekker. What the fuck? Okay, wow. What's happening here? Click that Jephthah. And so I just wanted to show the date. May 1602. Okay, interesting. Earlier I was bringing up Henry Chettle with the Danish tragedy. Click back. Scroll up to the D's. Oh, what is that? Danish tragedy? Click the Danish tragedy. Let's check out the date here. July 1602. Huh. So a lot of people have said Henslow will copy a Shakespeare play because it's popular. And so if Henry Chettle is not writing some version of Hamlet, then he is writing some knockoff of Hamlet. And one would think he'd be writing a knockoff of Hamlet right around when Hamlet's being successful. Right? Okay. Let's see if I got any more finds in here. If we keep reading that passage, which we do not have to, there's going to be some rare words like valenced and chopine Those both show up in Thomas Dekker. And then we're going to get an interesting discussion that mirrors Plato's Ion and goes into the stuff of Plato's Ion. Let me see. I don't have it marked out. God bless. There's another part in this section where he makes an allusion to Julius Caesar. So, if you've ever wondered why people dates Hamlet to 1600, it's because it's got a bunch of Julius Caesar parallels. And so people said Julius Caesar's 99, so Hamlet's got to be right after that, so 1600. But let's go back to the Lost Plays database. Let's go to 1602. Let's go to the C's. Oh, Caesar's Fall? Like a Julius Caesar play that we could quote up and down? Go ahead and click Caesar's Fall. May 1602. So maybe it's just some giant coincidence, but it's kind of amazing how the Henslow Diary has this clustering of dates in spring, early summer of 1602 that all seem to have hits to Act 2, Scene 2 of Hamlet. Jephthah, Caesar's Fall, Danish Tragedy. And that's on top of the references to the War of the Theatres, which, for all intents and purposes, Shakespeare is not known to be part of the War of the Theatres. People argue whether he is or isn't. One such play that they do include is Hamlet. The other two would be Twelfth Night and Troilus and Cressida. But as I have argued before, Troilus and Cressida is first a Dekker play, and it would just make way more sense if Troilus and Cressida is some version of that Dekker play, some reworked version for the 1609 printing, because that play fits in perfectly to the War of the Theatres. And that at some point, yeah, Dekker's the one that ends the War of the Theatres with Satyromastics, and as the Parnassus plays say, Shakespeare ended the War of the Theatres. And perhaps that just is Dekker as Shakespeare, whatever that means. But at some point, anybody that's trying to pull back the dating of the actual Hamlet, not just Quarto 1, not just the Ur-Hamlet, but anybody that's trying to pull back the dating of the authentic, genuine folio Quarto 2 Hamlet, well, they got to contend with this information. And I sincerely doubt that Dekker in the May of 1602 just decided, fuck it, I'll write a Jephthah play because of some 1589 play, right? And like, okay, it may be a coincidence that all these 1602 clusters pop up, but it also seems a coincidence that 1602 clusters would pop up with a revival of an old play that's reviving in 1602, 3, or 4, right? And that, at some point, like, do you see how nasty this is? You see how many names we've said? We haven't even said some of the names that people expect. I haven't even said Philip Sidney once today. No time did we ever get to pull up De Vere and any of this stuff. At no point did North even come up, I brought up Florio, but not to actually connect him to Hamlet. This has all been Henslow names, or else hack writer names. Nashe, Dekker, Heywood, Monday, Chettle, and so at some point, I'm not saying that all of those people had to have written the complete entirety of Hamlet and that any other candidate you're thinking of has to be expelled. But you got to ask, why is Nashe being the reference for Hamlet? Why are these Dekker plays popping up? Or else Chettle plays popping up? What is happening here? Why is John Jowett able to connect Heywood to the Warm Clown speech? What the hell is that about? And as far as I'm concerned, nobody's really answering these questions very seriously. Like, they get brought up, and then that sort of seems to be it. Like, nobody's taken the Jowett thing and gone further with it. Nobody's really getting anywhere with Dennis's essay, which has been out for a little while now. It's not able to make us actually pull it back. It's just able to maybe make us see that the 89 Hamlets into the 94 Hamlet into the quarter one Hamlet and the quarter two Hamlet, it is all technically the same Hamlet, but by no means does that mean that it's the same author every time, or that it's only the same author every time. That plays go through companies. Companies are the ones that retain rights to it. And when somebody dies or leaves or isn't available, somebody else can work on that play. That's not crazy to think. Now, what is a little crazy is why the hell are we saying all these Henslow names with Hamlet? They're not supposed to be Chamberlain's men writers. What's happening? Well, I think at some point, this whole strict rivalry company paradigm that we've set up is all a bunch of malarkey just to keep Shakespeare in this stable little bubble. But as soon as we tear down that stable little bubble, we realize that Shakespeare is kind of a total anomaly because every other writer is going around and drink again is going around and writing for several companies. We got Haywood doing Wooster's Men, Admiral's Men, Derby's Men, presumably Lord Chamberlain's Men here. So yeah, like I think once we derail with some of those assumptions, some of these things start to be a little clearer. And what I'm seeing is a through line with Nashe. I don't know that I've done anything like the work to go find the passages that are Nashe's. I really haven't done all the full work to fully conclude that Nashe is Thomas Dekker, although I've got that in another video. I wanted to maybe bring that up tonight, but we're pushing midnight for some of y'all's times. I'm past midnight over here, so I won't go into it. But yeah, basically, I've come up with a lot of stuff to add to Donna Murphy's idea about Dekker and Nashe, and I will say what I've come up with does not necessarily conclude that Nashe faked his death, because the stuff that I've found predates 1601. But I think there's a lot of reason to think that Nashe is using the Dekker name before 1601. You can say whatever you want after 1601. You might have to come up with some wacky theories. But Thomas Dekker is not a fucking person. He does not exist. There's no historical record of Thomas Dekker. Nobody has any idea what he is, especially Philip Womack. That guy has no idea what Thomas Dekker's about. That's a little pot shot if anybody gets it. But yeah, at some point, it's completely open-ended. Now the question is, yeah, does Nashe die or not? And like I said, for another video. Yeah, I don't know. Thanks, guys, for tuning in a bunch. If you got any other questions, shoot them here now. Otherwise, shoot them off in the comments section once it's done being live. And yeah, I'll try and get to them, especially Mark or Daniel or Apollo or any of you guys. I would love to hear your thoughts on is Harvey actually talking about Hamlet? Do you think that we need to be pulling the dates this far back? Or is any of these various theories compelling? Because these are three completely different theories, right? And that's not even including Kid doing Q1.
Yeah, we barely even got to talk about Kid, didn't we? You know?
Yeah, but I knew it was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. And honestly, like, other than Vickers' attribution stuff, I don't really have much to say about Kid because there's not that much biographical documentation. I can go look more into Lucas Ern's stuff because Lucas Ern has some stuff on Kid that he wants to connect Kid to the Pembrokes, which our buddy David Richardson, huge fan of that, showing that, okay, Kid is early and often influenced by Mary's Closet drama project. So Kid writing the Ur-Hamlet or writing the early Lear, like, I think David's really on board with a lot of the stuff that Vickers says, and he uses Ern to make that connection to Mary, and I'm open to that. But I'm also just like super skeptical that like Vickers and Freebury are the only ones really pushing Kid, and I just fucking hate their methods. Like I just don't like the methods. I don't trust them whatsoever. I think they're horribly wrong about Arden. If you put a gun to my head, I'm siding with Gary Taylor and crew every time about Arden, because at least they'll acknowledge that Arden's two writers, and at least they'll acknowledge that Arden does have overlap with Shakespeare. I don't think it's so simple as this. The Stratford man wrote Arden of Faversham. I think both parties are super duper overlooking Nash, Greene, Drayton, which Taylor does look at Drayton, but I'm not sure how he goes about it because Drayton doesn't have dramatic texts. But yeah, like he only looks at a few Greene dramatic texts because there are only a few, and he only looks at Summers' Last Will and Testament. Does not look at any of the pamphlets for Nash and Greene, or neither side does. And if you look at the pamphlets for Nash and Greene, they score better with Arden than any other author not named Shakespeare. Like way better than Kidd, way fucking better. And yeah, I've actually done this for the first 4 scenes of Arden. I got exhausted, but I just started picking rare word, rare word, rare word, rare word, rare word, rare word. And yeah, like Kidd draws blanks on just gigantic swaths of words to the point where like, yeah, this dozens of not dozens, but like at least about a dozen writers were scoring better than Kidd. Like Drayton, Monday, Johnson was about even with Kidd. Like it really wasn't close. And yeah, the top 3 scorers that were not named Shakespeare, and I included, I didn't include DeVere because he only has so much output, but I included Mary Sidney, I included Gabriel Harvey, I included Philip Sidney. The 3 writers that scored the best on these rare words were Nash, Greene, and Dekker in that order. And they were all really close to each other, and there was a giant gap after that, and the next highest person was Drayton. And so like, yeah, like that could be due to canon size, because once I include Nash and Greene's pamphlets, their canon size explodes. But as a sort of control, Lodge has a bigger canon size than both of them word count wise, and yeah, Lodge was not scoring even as well as Drayton. So they're at some point there were like too many exact phrases, like by the shins. By the shins is in Arden of Faversham. By the shins is only in 2 writers in all of Elizabethan literature. You want to guess which 2 they are?
Nash and Dekker?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, like, I don't know. Kidd never uses that goddamn phrase. And then all these phrases that Kidd does use that Vicar, like, tries to show as really strong proof. If you go look into the pamphlets, you go look, especially Terrors of the Night, Nash's parallels look the same or better. Those exact parallels that he tries to say, oh, only Kidd could have written this. And so I'm still trying to debate with myself how to approach this argument, because I would like to make some claim about Arden of Faversham at some point in my life. But yeah, now we're in a whole other subject of conversation, but there's not so much to know about Kidd, and it's really up in the air. We really are only sure about Spanish tragedy, and honestly, after testing Arden and Spanish tragedy, this weird thing happened where when Kidd got a hit in Arden from Spanish tragedy, it was always from the same sections. And so some sections were guaranteed never to give a hit, and some sections were guaranteed to like consistently give hits, which just made me wonder, like, is Spanish tragedy written in 2 sittings, which we do know editions were made, but those editions aren't supposed to be super numerous. And then, like, at some point, just is Spanish tragedy itself a collaboration, and they just slapped Kidd's name on there? Anything's possible. I don't think anybody's ever really asked that. So, yeah, I will leave it here. I hope some of this was compelling. I hope this gets some people to start looking at Nash, and I hope I didn't sound like a crazy person. I hope some of this made sense. I hope I wasn't too inflammatory, or I hope I was very inflammatory in some cases.
No, that's good.
But yeah, I don't know. Any last thoughts?
Yes, because I've kind of got into this whole pre-Christian era, right? And so if you see this bookshelf behind me, well, other hand, with my whole written investigation into the word weird and how it connects to Shakespeare and all the pre-Christian words and Old English and stuff like that. So, I've got this copy of Saxo Grammaticus, right, which is going to be where, one of these inspirations for the Hamlet story, right? And, I've already got Thomas Nashe apophenia, right? So I'm going to see Thomas Nashe correlations everywhere, just as bad as chance, right? Because I feel like I have a small stake in it. This is what pretty much got me into this research. But I was looking at some of the notes by Hilda Ellis Davidson, and this is just some of the commentary and notes prior to the Hamlet story in this thing. And I'm just reading through the notes here, right? Just seeing if we get any hits. And so let's just read some of her notes. And obviously she's not a Shakespeare or even Elizabethan scholar at all, but let's just see what she has to say. What names just happen to pop up in this random commentary? It's a large ass book, and this is just one page on one of the Saxo Grammaticus story. But here she goes. Much interest has been shown in this story, the Hamlet story, because it has formed the basis of Shakespeare's Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. It was no doubt for this reason that Elton translated the first 9 books of Saxo into English in 1894. It has been generally assumed that Shakespeare took the plot from François de Belleforest's Histories Tragiques, although his play was probably finished by 1601, and the English translation of Belleforest did not appear until 1608. It indeed shows some signs of influence from Shakespeare's play. So obviously Shakespeare must have been reading at least the Latin version or the French version, right? Because I think he translated like into Latin or something. Shakespeare must have seen an earlier version, or the original French work, which was being written in 1560 onwards. A further possibility, convincingly argued by Ingva Olsen, is that Shakespeare used a simpler Latin version of Saxo's story by Albert Crans, published at the beginning of the 16th century. He may have in either case have been led on to study Saxo in the original, once he became interested in the story. An earlier play about Hamlet, the contents of which we can only conjecture, was acted in 1589. The allusions to it indicate that it included a ghost, and the author is generally thought to have been Thomas Kyd, and the play is the Senecan revenge tragedy. Shakespeare presumably used this, together with some version of the Saxo story, when he came to write his play. There is no clear evidence that he read Saxo in Latin, but it is by no means impossible, since there were copies of his work available in England in the 16th century. The question has been discussed in considerable detail by K. Dollerup and Denmark, Hamlet and Shakespeare, published in 1975. After a full and cautious examination of the evidence, he comes to the conclusion that, quote, Saxo's influence must have been greater than is commonly assumed, and he, rather than Belleforest, may have been the primary source for the Elizabethan dramas. Once again, this comes out in 1980, so grain of salt maybe. He has shown that, apart from the plot itself, there are a number of passages in Shakespeare's play which may be echoes of the portions of Saxo. While at least one of Saxo's tales, that of Asvith and Asmund, in Book 5, was known to Thomas Nashe, Shakespeare's contemporary. Saxo's continuation of the Hamlet story in Book 4 seems to be based on other popular tales and roughly pieced together. So yeah, of all the people, they're like, maybe Shakespeare must have been reading it, and he must have been doing that. He maybe even got inspired to kind of read the original, but the only guy that by 1980 that we can definitely know that they had it was Thomas Nashe. And people already know my interest in the Nashe ash tree connection, and how the ash tree is exactly what you make fucking spears out of, right? So it's just like, I don't know, it's all there anyway for me anyway. So
well, and it's specifically spears and ash tree. It goes back to Odinic mythology, right?
Yep.
And Hamlet is from Odinic mythology.
Yeah, I mean, this is supposed to be like, Danish, and so technically we're not in Scandinavia proper, right? We're like in Denmark, so it's more like Germany or Wotan, maybe, perhaps, right? But if anyone's seen the recent Northman movie, they transport the story from Hamlet rather than Denmark. They put it in Iceland, so in the more Viking territory and the more Odin territory, so to speak. But yeah, it's there, and when we talk about just the more basic raw elements of the story of Hamlet, we'll talk about irony and, that it's still an Odinic story regardless, and that even Hamlet's name, the inspiration for Hamlet, might even have this etymology that bears Odin's name in it anyway. But we'll talk that on a later video. But I just wanted to show that, yeah, that just... If the one name that just happened to drop in here, that someone who actually may have actually had some Saxo on his hands, was Thomas Nashe again. So no matter what, the first reference of Hamlet doesn't seem like either word searches, however you want to go about it, Thomas Nashe is popping up over and over again. So,
yep, yeah, no, that's yet another Nashe Hamlet. Like, it's this weird thing where, it's like that author could have been like, and we don't know if Francis Bacon ever read Saxo, and we don't know if Shakespeare ever read it, and we don't know if so and so. We do know Thomas Nash read it, and don't know if Marlowe read it, but definitely know Thomas Nash read it. Don't know if Greene read it, definitely know Thomas Nash.
Yeah.
So, just want to really hammer that home. I don't know if I'm going to continue being so much an Nash guy or not. I'm just kind of going where the world takes me and where the research takes me and where it makes sense. And, I'm filling in gaps still as we speak. We're all doing that. None of us have all of these texts all read already. And yeah, would especially love any of you guys with actual Nash experience and information and intelligence and understanding. Sound off, please. Sound off and let me know where I'm astray, what makes sense, what doesn't. Help me dig deeper. Super appreciate it. Any comments or questions from the comment boards, or have I put everybody to sleep officially? I start an ASMR panel. You know what I'm saying?
No, just
that gets the real clicks.
me
Sacked for
and
sleeping.
me and Floating Home still joking about Thomas More, or I said Sir Thomas Drink More. And yeah, Thomas Dekker, yeah, the Phantom Thread is Floating Homes definitely mentioned too. But I think that's all the questions that yeah, that's pretty much it for the most part. Yeah, Floating Homes says zzz, yeah, I think he's like dozing off too.
And yeah, don't worry.
He's not
This
dozing off,
will
but
be going soon. I'll show you what's on my computer right now. This is I'm working on a good old fashioned Canva presentation like I did a couple years ago. Some of those things, and I just want to go over all the beat points for Nash that I think just bear consideration. By no means do I think I can make some totalizing argument for Nash, but there are just some things that I can't really explain it without Nash. So kind of need to throw those out there. Yeah, it may be a mess of a presentation because it's going to include some Shakespeare stuff, some Dekker stuff. So I don't know where it's going to go, but we'll see. Hopefully I can get that out in a week or two and we can present it.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, everyone, make sure you check out the links down below if you want to come hang out on Discord with us and drop even more of finds or resources with us. Make sure you hit that come join with us, or if you want to really support it, come join the Areopagus Book Club where we're reading Richard III right now. Yeah, otherwise like, share, subscribe. Floating Homes, Marty, Apollo Cobain, and Alacrity. It's great to see y'all all here tonight. It was like the Mount Rushmore crew of our So it was good to see everybody here and kind of interact with all this stuff. I'm gonna line up another stream next week with Chance for probably just talking maybe more just we could just talk about the play itself, right? Rather not the nitty gritty, because I think still even just talking about the philosophy of the play still is going to elucidate more of these author candidates and just where the ideas kind of follow them. Because hell, if you could even figure out what the heck the Potomachi is about, or what the Gabriel Nash Harvey our feuds are about too, you're kind of maybe hopefully line up where their ideas about aesthetics and art are kind of lying, right? And that'll hopefully maybe be able to parse out who's writing what, or what directions these plays are leaning in that direction. So make sure you check back next week, because I've got some more stuff lined up.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in thus far and sticking around, and hope you guys enjoyed it. And hope to be back with more. And the last thought: Stagliardo, not without mustard. That's a Nash phrase. All right. Keep that in mind. Okay,
all right, guys. Well, we're signing
Adios.
out here tonight. Yeah, make sure you read all these texts for yourselves and all these essays for yourselves. Make sure we didn't miss anything. Make sure that we look smart, etc. And as always, Nullius in Verba. Read it yourself. We will see you all hopefully next week. You have a good weekend, and we will talk to you all later.